Welcome to episode 8 of the CompTIA CySA Plus training series. Today's episode begins domain 3 of all of the 4 domains. And in domain 3, we're going to be talking about incident response management. And in episode 8, we're going to begin with incident response frameworks. My name is Hackaholics, your trainer for today. And to get more videos like this one, make sure that you like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell. All right, domain 3 is incident response and management, and this weighs in at 24% of the final exam, the CS0-004 0004 exam, and it focuses on the entire incident response life cycle. In episode 8, we're going to begin with looking at a variety of incident response frameworks. Now, thankfully, I have actually done individual videos on each one of these frameworks already. So if you want to get more in-depth information about them, all of that stuff is available for you already on this channel. But today we're just going to be taking a glimpse at each one of them. We're going to look at the steps, and we're going to look at some case studies into which they apply and how they will set the stage for the rest of this domain's content. Domain 3 is the heart of what makes CySA truly valuable, or the CySA analyst, we should say, knowing how to handle an incident from the first alert to full recovery. Now, I will tell you that if you're just starting out in cybersecurity, it's very unlikely that you're going to get a job as an incident responder. Incident responders have to be quick on their toes, and they have to be cool and calm in the pressure and the heat of a major incident, because it can be pretty stressful. And if you don't respond accordingly, the damage can be pretty big. And for that very reason, companies typically don't put brand new green rookies in a role like this. So if anything, you will start as a junior analyst, and you'll go up to the SOC analyst, and you'll be doing alert triage. And if anything, you might be able to kind of send them to the incident response team. But you're not going to be handling the incident from the first alert to full recovery. That's probably not what's going to happen to you when you're just first starting out in cybersecurity. So the key things that we're going to be talking about in comparison to 03, the 03 version of the examination, the 04 version puts some more refinement and a little bit more emphasis on certain frameworks. So the streamlined frameworks, this would be the cyber kill chain from Lockheed Martin, the diamond model, the MITRE attack matrix, but there's more emphasis on the practical mapping of things. So how these things actually connect to real life scenarios. That's basically kind of like the big connection of the stuff that used to exist on 03, but we're now approaching it in a new light for 04. There's going to be a separate emphasis on detection versus analysis. This is new in 04. There's going to be an added focus on triage and timeline creation as distinct activities, and more scenario-based questions on mapping indicators to frameworks. So that's the gist of it. Chapter 8 is going to be focusing on the detection and analysis portion of things. So this is where most of the real-world incidents are actually won or lost, whether or not you detect them and analyze them in time and appropriately. Spotting the attack early, understanding what's actually happening before containment, which is the kind of the next step. After you analyze or detect something and you deem it to be malicious, the very first step is to contain it so that it doesn't spread. So before you even get to detainment or containment, excuse me, I'm kind of like mumbling over my words today. The detection mechanism is very important. The analysis mechanism is very important. So by the end of this episode, we're going to be able to recognize attack patterns using these modern frameworks, triage them effectively, and build accurate timelines that will help the leadership understand the scope of things. And so we're going to be diving deep into it, and we're going to, for the most part, just use the content and the lecture environment. But you can always go into a sim if you want to kind of do more practical exercises. You should already know by now that TryHackMe will get you a free membership with just a username and password, and you'll get access to the rooms that have the Splunk sim inside of them. So all of those things are readily available to you. We don't have any specific labs for them because each one of those rooms inside of TryHackMe is an individual lab. So I would just highly recommend you actually check them out. At the end of this video, I'll kind of give you a quick little search help just so you know how to find them. But for the most part, you would be doing those as an independent study for yourself. We're just going to be reviewing the various kill chains, the various frameworks, and how they apply. To get access to the CYSA Plus book, the practice questions, the exclusive episode downloads, and to get access to the CompTIA Linux Plus, Network Plus, Pentest Plus, and Security Plus course contents, and to get access to me via Discord plus all the future perks and content rollouts, consider joining Hackaholics Anonymous. We have 4 tiers: the Supporter, Agent, Guardian, and Master. Each tier gets their own Discord server and early access to content. The Agent, Guardian, and Master levels get exclusive content, exclusive downloads, monthly Python automations, live streams with me every month, plus so much more. And to join, you can simply click the link in the description below. It's the link that says Join Hackaholics Anonymous. I look forward to seeing you in the Discord chats. If not, I look forward to seeing you in the comment section. Until then, happy hacking and stay out of trouble. Okay, let's do a detailed domain overview, kind of like an introduction detailed overview of the domain. So incident response is the structured process of handling security incidents to limit damage, recover operations, and prevent recurrence. So all of these things are very important. This is not a one is better than another one. We should focus on one area more than another one. That is not at all the case. It needs to be a structured process, meaning there needs to be a set of checklists or steps that have to be taken every single time. And then the whole purpose of that structure is to limit damage, prevent damage from kind of going out of control and hurting the entire network, recover the operations if they've actually impacted the operations to the point that you no longer can operate as a business and you need to get back to business as usual, and prevent recurrence. And this is part of the lessons learned process, the debrief that happens after the incident is over, so that we can discover how they got in, what they did, how can we prevent them from getting in again, how can we secure the vulnerabilities that they were able to take advantage of. All of those conversations happen in the prevent recurrence. We call this the lessons learned and the tabletop exercise, but more, it's kind of like a meeting with everybody that was involved, and it also includes upper management. It might include the C-suite executives that would be involved because they need to be in the loop of everything that's going on. So this is a big step as well, and it's a cycle. So the incident response cycle is not something that happens once and then we just wait for another incident to take place before we do this again. We ideally, in a good environment, they would be running tabletop exercises regularly. They'll be running simulated attacks against their own systems regularly, just to see how the defensive team will react. So the security team, the security management, I should say, they'll schedule an attack against their own team, and they won't tell the defensive team that the attack is taking place. And then the job of the defensive team will be to make sure that they respond accordingly and do everything accordingly. And then after it's over, they'll have the debrief and the lessons learned, where they're like, okay, this is where we did great, this is where we messed up, etc. So all of that just to prepare the team and keep them sharp and keep them on their toes. In the 0-4 examination, the domain, the incident response domain, emphasizes practical application of frameworks to real incidents, separating detection, which means spotting that something is wrong, from analysis, which means understanding what is wrong, how it's happening, and why is it happening. Then there's the triage process, which is the prioritization of the alerts that come in, and the creation of a timeline, which is actually really, really important. You know, at 8 o'clock, this happened. At 8:15, this happened. At 8:23, this happened, etc., and etc., until the whole thing is over and you are now in the lessons learned phase. Preparation for performance-based questions involving log analysis, framework mapping, and triage decisions. And a lot of these things will require that you actually pay attention to the log items. Like, it's a very, very... It's not fun to do, but it's really, really important to do, because in SIM environments, when you're doing security analysis, right, you're inside of a security operations center, you're going to use a SIM. There's not going to be a very detailed overview of each individual log item. And even in those cases, you should be able to, okay, let me open this specific event item and then look at the details of it inside of the SIM. So you still need to look at all of the details inside of the SIM. There's also the version of this that they actually send you the log, and now you're just looking at individual log items without them being correlated to other events that may have taken place during that incident. And so being able to read the log items individually without a SIM helping you correlate them together, and then being able to paint a picture of what happened, that's going to be a really important skill set in this specific topic. The first framework that we're going to look at is the Cyber Kill Chain Framework by Lockheed Martin. Now, this is the actual 7-stage process. I do have an entire video that's dedicated to this, so I do encourage you to check this out. The CS0-004 examination takes 3 core frameworks, but it streamlines coverage to focus on the usability of them. So the Cyber Kill Chain is the first core framework, and this is the one where most conversations around incident response will actually connect back to. They will try to look at what stage of this series of steps the current attack is in, or the current incident is in. At what stage did we notice what's going on? So obviously the goal would be to notice from reconnaissance, because they haven't weaponized the information that they got about us. They haven't delivered a payload. We have not been exploited. There hasn't been some kind of ransomware or some kind of executable installed on our systems. There is no a remote command and control server that's controlling everything, and they have not been able to exfiltrate data. They haven't been able to encrypt all of our files and hold us at ransom, all of those things. So the earlier in this process you detect the attack that's taking place, the better it is. And that's the goal, is to be able to detect it in reconnaissance and make sure that we can just go ahead and stop them in their tracks before they can even do anything. Now, when you review, we actually did this when we were using the MITRE attack matrix, and we were looking at a couple of advanced persistent threats. So when you go look at the advanced persistent threats on MITRE attack, you pull up the groups portion, and all of this I'll share with you again, but there's an entire video, there's multiple videos really dedicated to this on this channel. But even inside of the CYSA course that you're in, there's also a video that we did earlier on where we went and looked at MITRE attack, and then we pulled up the different groups. And some groups can skip reconnaissance and they can go directly into weaponization and delivery, because they either got specialized information from somebody that works on the inside, or they were able to use open source intelligence to actually analyze what your infrastructure might be like, and then from there they were able to weaponize that data. So there are possibilities that you don't necessarily start from reconnaissance when you're actually doing the attack, and you could be starting from weaponization or delivery. From the perspective of the hacker, that's exactly where you want to be, right? That's a good thing, because you're already further along the kill chain than starting from the beginning, getting noticed from the beginning, and then getting kicked out and blocked off and reported, all those things. So from the perspective of the attacker, you want to start out as late as possible inside of these series of steps. From the perspective of the defender, you want to catch them as early as possible in these series of steps. So if they come in to the game with weaponized data, then fine, that's the earliest you can catch them. You should be able to catch them right there. If they come in trying to deliver the payload and you catch something being transferred into some of your networks or some of your computers, that's perfectly fine, as long as you catch them, and that's actually the first step that they've taken inside of their attack against you. But the whole goal here is to catch them as early as possible, so that the attack doesn't get fully to the phase where they're actually taking actions on their objectives. Command and control and actions on their objectives is the very end of it, and it's where ideally where we would, for them, right, on their end, for the attacker, for them to be able to take actions on their objectives is a gold mine of data that could, again, they could encrypt our systems, right? They can encrypt our systems and they can ask for ransom. And if we don't have backups, we are absolutely screwed. So there's a lot of things that can be done from our perspective to make sure that it doesn't happen. It's very rare that they'll come in immediately and take actions on their objectives. So it's very rare, almost impossible for them to start here. So that's lucky for us. But it can be very possible that they'll start at delivery and they already have all the data that they need. They've weaponized all their data. They've created all their payloads. They're now delivering their payloads and they're working on exploiting us. That is very possible, and that can happen more often than we think it might. So it's very important for us to be on our toes and to be aware of all of these things. So the purpose of the cyber kill chain, or the best use case of the cyber kill chain, is for understanding the attacker progression and identifying where our defenses can break the chain. So where in this series of steps can we come in and break the chain that the attacker is using to attack us? And if you want more information on this, again, I highly encourage you to go into the channel homepage, our channel homepage, and just search for cyber kill chain, and you'll be able to find the videos that are relevant to this specific topic. Our next framework is going to be the diamond model of intrusion analysis. And so there are 4 core features on this one. And this one is used for mapping the relationships in an incident, the who, the how, the what, and the where. So the adversary would be our who, right? Who is attacking us, and who's the actual operator that's attacking us, and then who is the beneficiary, who is the person that might be hiring that operator that could stand to benefit from our systems getting attacked. The infrastructure is how. So what are they actually attacking? Or what specific elements, or how are they attacking us? I should say it like that. How are they attacking us? What is their methods of attack against us? The capability is the what of what they're attacking, and then the victim would be the where of what they're attacking. Now, to get a little bit more detail for you, I pulled up Gemini, and I dropped it in here just so we can get some more information. And what's really nice about this kind of put a smile on my face. At the very end of it, it gave the diamond model reference to a link, and it actually is that link that's on my channel. So this is my video that is now being referenced from Gemini, and this put a giant smile on my face, let me tell you. So this is actually a very, very cool thing that we were able to see. So it's giving you the full summary, basically. It gives you the summary of the video in bullet points and everything like that, and then actually has the link to the video itself. And again, this is just super, I'm like nerding out over the fact that my video is being referenced inside of a search for Gemini. I'm so baffled by this right now. It's actually really, really cool. Okay, so let's go here then, and let's look at the very, very top, right? So the 4 core features, the vertices of this. So we have the adversary, the who, so the adversary operator, the actual person behind the keyboard executing the commands, the adversary customer, the entity that stands to benefit from the attack. It could be a nation state, depending on who they're attacking, or it could just be a competing company. The capability would be the how behind it. So this refers to the tools, the techniques, the procedures, the TTPs that are used. It includes malware, exploit kits, social engineering, any of those things. The capacity inside of the capability is the set of vulnerabilities that the adversary can exploit with their current tools. The infrastructure is the where of where they're attacking. So this includes physical or logical communication paths. Type 1 infrastructure would be owned or fully controlled by the adversary, so their own command and control server. Type 2 would be infrastructure owned by a third party, but being used or compromised by the adversary. So it could be a compromised legitimate website that's used to host malware. It could be a botnet, for example, that the adversary has now purchased through the dark web, and the owner of the botnet would be considered the third party, and they've now been hired to attack us, and the adversary is hiring them to do it, right? The victim is the what, so this is the target of the attack, the victim persona, the people or organizations being targeted, the victim assets, the specific attack surface, IP addresses, host names, or specific software where the capability is actually being deployed. Then we have the 2 primary axes, so the social political axes, which goes back and forth between the adversary and the victim. So this describes the relationship and the motive. It asks us, why is this adversary targeting this specific victim? Is it for financial gain, espionage, or activism? And then there's the technical axis, the balance between, or the back and forth between the capability and the infrastructure. And this describes how the tools and the network work together. It focuses on the technology that enables the attack to function. And then there are the meta features. So these are things that we're going to be reviewing inside of logs, for example, and trying to determine from our SIM dashboards and things along those lines. So this is the context, right? So to make the whole thing actionable, we need to add meta features to the events that take place. And it lets us get the needed tracking to be able to actually track an attack over time, right? So timestamp, when did it happen? Phase, where does it fit in the life cycle, the cyber kill chain life cycle, right? The reconnaissance or delivery phases, for example. Was the attack actually successful, or are they still in the middle of it? The direction, was the traffic moving from the infrastructure to the victim or vice versa? So are they sending us malware, or are they extracting data from us? The methodology, general class of activity. Is it spear phishing that they use to get in? Are they using an executable that relies on Ubuntu Linux systems? Something, I don't know, something along those lines. And then the resources, what external elements were needed, specific hardware or stolen credentials. And in the practical application, this is just an example of it, where it could be used to do pivoting, where you actually pivot from one location to another one, because the points are connected. Knowing one piece of information allows you to pivot to find other piece of information. So you find a piece of malware, this would be the capability. You reverse engineer to find a hard-coded IP address. This is the infrastructure. You check your firewall logs to see who else in your company contacted that IP address. This would be trying to find the victims. And finally, you search that IP address to see if it's being used by a known group before, and that would be the adversary. And you can find that on VirusTotal. You could find it on MITRE attack, etc., etc. So when you link the multiple diamonds together over time, you create the activity thread, and this allows you to map out an attacker's entire campaign, showing how they moved from early reconnaissance to final data exfiltration, and this is often used along the MITRE attack framework to provide the full view of what's going on. And then we have the reference to our diamond model video that provides a clear walkthrough of the diamond model's components and explains how security operations use it to analyze threat actors. This is so cool. I love the fact that that's actually happening. But okay, so that's pretty much it. That's all we got for the diamond model. Our next framework would be the MITRE attack framework, and this is the modern gold standard. It provides tactics, techniques, sub-techniques, and procedures as the outlines, and it focuses on, or CS0-004 I should say, focuses on using the enterprise matrix, which is the most common, then mapping logs and indicators to techniques. So for example, the ID of phishing and the ID of command and control scripting, being able to map these IDs to the actual techniques that are being used, and then using the attack navigator for heat maps. So the tip for the exam is to expect practice-based questions, performance-based questions, asking you to map log snippets or alerts to attack techniques. So one of the easiest ways that I can do this for you is to actually show you this yet again, but again, there are multiple videos on this channel already that you can use to reference this specific resource and learn more about it. So if we just search for MITRE, it'll bring up the link for us, and it's at attack.mitre.org. This is the enterprise matrix that was being referred to. So we have the columns themselves, which are the tactics. So reconnaissance tactic. Underneath it, it has 11 techniques, for example, active scanning. And if we expand on this, we have sub-techniques, for example, scanning IP blocks, vulnerability scanning, etc. Now, if I go into this one right here, I'll be able to see some procedural examples. So these are the actual entities previously, Ember Bear or Team TNT, that actually used this specific procedure, this sub-technique in the procedure. The mitigations against it, the detection strategies, and references for it as well. And so if we go ahead and just say we're going to run with this specific thing, right? So if we go look at here, we see that it has its ID, and then 001 would be the ID of the sub-technique, right? But if we wanted to go to reconnaissance, it would actually be its own technique, which would be the TA CS0-043. This is the actual tactic. And under tactic, we have the 1519, or 1595, I should say, T1595, which was the active scanning. And then underneath this one, 001 was scanning IP blocks. So that's where we just came from. So if we go into any of these, right, we would be able to see a variety of different things that, and specifically what you're looking for are these procedural examples. Obviously, you want to see what softwares were used and things like that, but typically it doesn't exist in the active scanning element itself because there are so many different things that can be linked to it. So what we would do is we would click on the Ember Bear, for example, and it brings us the actual group. So this is now inside of the groups section. I mentioned earlier that we could look at groups and their specific tactics, techniques, and procedures. So the Ember Bear group is a Russian state-sponsored cyber espionage group. They have associated group names and descriptions, so it could be Bleeding Bear, it could be Cadet Blizzard, etc. The techniques that they have used are these, right? And so we can see the full list of the techniques that they've used in previous campaigns. And as you can see, the techniques are very, very long. Now, the software that they've used is also listed here. So if you're looking for specific software that might be used, or if you want to start with this software and try to see which groups have used them or what they can be used for, you can always search for the software itself. So for example, Whispergate, let's say. So if I go to the search up here and I just type Whispergate, like that, I'll be able to see the Whispergate software come at the top. So you can actually search by software and then try to narrow down what specific groups have used the software. I can always, of course, click on the group, the software name itself, and it'll bring up this whole thing for me and the various techniques that are associated with it being used and the groups that have used it. So for example, Ember Bear, right? So all of these things they all connect to each other. Now, the thing that I really want you to pay attention to is this thing right here. So the attack navigator is unbelievably useful, and it also shows up on the profile pages of the groups themselves. You'll also see this button, the attack navigator. And so if we click on this, we'll see the download version and the view version. So if I click on view, it'll open it inside my browser for me. And now this will actually show me the path for Ember Bear and what they've used to go along their actual attack. So, what tactics they used under, or what techniques they used under reconnaissance, scanning IP blocks, vulnerability scanning, and then how did they develop their resources, and we see that highlighted here. How did they gain initial access? We see that highlighted. How did they execute, and then what were their persistence techniques, and then what was their privilege escalation techniques, and then we go forward, what was their defense evasion techniques, what was their credential access techniques, what was their discovery techniques, lateral movement, collection, command and control, and finally exfiltration. So this is actually one of these groups that was able to achieve the action on their objectives and actually get to the very last stage and establish exfiltration to a cloud storage device. So this is gold right here. So if you find one thing, it can lead you to getting the rest of the data. So if you come in and you notice that, I don't know, PowerShell is being used in some funky way, and you're like, okay, I'm curious how PowerShell may have used it. You try to find an IP address, you find the IP address, and then you go to VirusTotal and you search up the IP address and you see that the IP address is attributed to the group Ember Bear, right? Or previously used by Ember Bear. Now you have a name that you can bring into MITRE and you can see, okay, what is the flow of techniques and tactics that this group would specifically use? So that would be using the group name itself. But if you wanted to, you can go to the software. So we'll go back to Whispergate. And then we'll do the same thing, drop down, click on view for the attack navigator, and then we'll be able to see the Whispergate software usage and where it came in from. So now notice, interestingly enough, it does not show anything for reconnaissance, resource development, or initial access. It starts from the element of, or actually, is this under initial? No, this is under execution. So under execution, we now see these little highlights being taking place, and then it goes to persistence, privilege escalation, etc., and it finally gets to the very end, where now this is actually being used for data destruction, for disk content, structure wipes, as well as system shutdowns and reboots. So notice how the path for this software is very different from the path for the actual group that previously used it. The Ember Bear group had a different set of goals that they were trying to achieve. The software that we're looking at has its own set of goals that it can accomplish, and most likely what it's used for. So it's a very, very interesting resource. It's a very powerful resource to use MITRE ATT&CK. Click around, find things. You can even search by their name right here individually up here. You can click on this CTI button and try to find groups, software, or campaign lists. You can start in any location. And ultimately what you're trying to do is you're trying to end up in a place like this, where you actually get to see how the attack maps out, how it actually moves forward, and what the steps before of it may have been and what the steps after it would have been. And it is extremely useful. So one of the key things that we would say that you should be familiar with is, at the very least, that, hey, you know what, there is this many columns. I think it's 13 altogether. But there's the columns that act as the tactic names, and inside of them there are techniques, which is the list that we see right here. And if we expand any of these ones that can be expanded, we can see that there are sub-techniques inside of them. So if you see this type of an ID, right, it has the .001. If you see that kind of an ID, that's a sub-technique. If you see this kind of an ID, that's the technique. If you go through that kind of an ID where you see TA, 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 where you see the TAs, those are the tactics. So these are just little kind of code snippets where it's like, okay, if I see it starting with a TA, I know it's a tactic. If I see it starting with just a regular T and it actually has numbers after it and there's no .001, .002, that's the technique. And then if I see the .005 or whatever, I know that that's a sub-technique. And so these are the things, again, that can be extremely useful to you if you just understand the format of these things. So if we click on one of these softwares, we now see that the software ID starts with an S for software. That part's pretty simple, right? So we can go and then now we see which specific tactics and techniques it's actually associated with. So these are the ID types, and you can see how these things actually connect back to each other. And of course, the group IDs start with a G. So the tactic starts with a TA, the technique starts with a T, the sub-technique has a .00 something at the end of it, software starts with an S, and group starts with a G. Those should be fairly simple for you to wrap your head around, and that way you can actually be able to kind of break down questions a little bit easier and try to find the map to those questions, these performance-based questions, asking you to map the log snippet or the alert to an attack technique. These types of things should be easier if you just understand the general scope of that matrix. Which brings us to the real-world examples that we have here. So these are actually real-world examples that have taken place previously, and we get to see how they've been mapped to various steps and various IDs, etc., for the frameworks that we just talked about. So looking at the SolarWinds supply chain attack, this is a very, very popular attack. SolarWinds was the software that, and it still is the software that thousands of different organizations, including government organizations, they use it for security. So they use it for network monitoring, they use it for a variety of different things. The SolarWinds suite of software is multifunctional, so it can do a lot of things. And it's a very big name. So a lot of big organizations and government entities use it. Now what happens is one of their updates was previously poisoned, meaning that the source code in the update that they were going to distribute to all of their users, that update was poisoned. So every single user that updated their SolarWinds software by default injected that malicious code, that poisoned update code into their own system, which means that all of their clients, or I should say most of them, because some of them were able to catch it, but most of their clients got poisoned and their systems were compromised, and it became a whole ordeal. And it's like one of those big names when it comes down to historic attacks that have taken place and the historic hacks that were taking place. It kind of comes in the same breath and the same spirit as the Stuxnet attack, etc. So it's a very popular attack, and it's probably very likely that you may have already heard of this. So What happened, technically, it was a supply chain attack because SolarWinds has clients, and so they are in the supply chain of all of those clients. They supply a service to all of their end clients. And to be able to poison the update of SolarWinds, you are now poisoning the supply chain. So this is why it's called a supply chain attack. So when we're looking at the cyber kill chain, there's recon weaponization, which was the backdoor that was inside of the update, the delivery of it, which was the software update. Then there was exploitation, installation, C2, and action. So this is basically where they came in, right? So previously I mentioned that they don't have to do recon. Somebody can come in without doing any recon. This is exactly how it would be done, because the recon against the end client, against a government entity or a company that uses SolarWinds, they don't have to do recon against them. All they need to do is they need to go ahead and weaponize the actual update for SolarWinds, and as a result, they will be able to hack into every single client that uses SolarWinds. Then there's the MITRE attack ID that was attached to it. So the technique is T1195, which is the supply chain compromise. There's also the application layer protocol technique, because there was the application layer that was messed with. And there's also the remote services technique, because they were able to gain C2 control and gain remote connections. So there's actually 3 techniques that maps to this specific attack. And finally, the adversary themselves. So the adversary, or excuse me, the diamond model framework analysis. We have the adversary themselves, which is the APT29. So you can actually find that group in MITRE and see what they've done and what software they've used, etc. The infrastructure was the compromised SolarWinds server. The capability was the Sunburst backdoor, which was used to actually establish the backdoor inside of the update. And the victim was government and Fortune 500 companies. So again, SolarWinds, I'm telling you, it's a very big name when it comes down to security and monitoring and things like that. And the government and Fortune 500 companies use them. So by executing and succeeding at this attack, this APT29 group was able to hack government and Fortune 500 companies. You have to understand the scope of that and how massive of an impact that actually is. The next one is the Colonial Pipeline ransomware. This was in 2021. So the Colonial Pipeline ransomware had a phishing delivery. This is where they came in. So they actually came in from the very beginning, and they were able to execute exploitation, installation, do all that stuff. And their final actions were to encrypt data and, of course, execute ransomware, to actually hold them at ransom and get money from them, from the Colonial Pipeline folks. And it all started from somebody clicking on a phishing link and opening a phishing email. So very, very simple entry point, but of course it worked. And then they were able to hold a large company at ransom. The attack references for this, the MITRE attack references, of course, it starts with phishing, and we have the data encrypted for impact, and then we have C2 for command and control. So these were the techniques that were mapped to this specific attack campaign. And finally, we talked about this in the last video, I want to say in episode 7, which is the 0-day exploit that was actually it went nuts, because when we were looking at the EPSS score for this, the exploitability likelihood of that taking place, when it was originally marked, when the CVSS score came in, it was a high CVSS score, but the probability of it, and if you don't know what any of this means, you need to watch the last episode. The severity score was very high, but the probability score was very low. And what happened was, within a matter of days, the probability score went to 95%, which means that they were very active with it and they were running it and they were succeeding with it. And so this thing kind of caught like wildfire, which is why they're calling the exploitation wave, because as soon as it kind of peaked, all of a sudden it hit so many different companies. And the companies that were paying attention to the exploitability score, the probability score, were able to protect themselves, but the ones who were just paying attention to the severity score and weren't looking at the activity were not able to protect themselves, and they were taken. So the kill chain is the exploitation was a 0-day remote code execution. And so it came in from exploitation, right? It didn't come in from reconnaissance, right? Installation was web shells. Then they were able to establish command and control, and they were able to exfiltrate data. And so The attack technique IDs that are mapped to this would be the T1190 for exploiting public-facing applications, because that's exactly what they did, and then being able to launch server software components and then exfiltrate over a C2 channel. So you can see how these things get mapped, right? So it's very likely that you're not going to get a large list of items for your question. It's going to be that, okay, they're going to give you a handful of IDs, and then they're probably going to, because it's impossible to ask people to remember every single ID and what that ID connects to. So they will give you the ID, they'll give you the basic descriptor of that ID, and then your job will be to try to map the ID itself to the specific attack that's taking place. There are thousands of IDs that exist on the MITRE attack matrix, and to expect somebody to remember them is really, really unfair, and most people, like 99% of people, will not be able to remember them. So I was not required to remember them. I don't think you will be required to remember them either, but you do need to understand how things map and what something like this basically means, right? What does it mean for application layer protocol to be executed? Something like that. So studying the MITRE attack matrix would be of benefit to you, both for the examination as well as just for your own personal knowledge, to see what exists and what can be done and how these specific things actually connect to each other. Now we get to talk about incident response activities and the detection and analysis, which are now getting a separate emphasis inside of the 04 examination. They are clearly split inside of the 04 examination compared to the 03 exam. So detection is identifying that something is wrong. Analysis is understanding the actual incident that's taking place. So it's very, very important to just be really, really good at this, okay? The analysis part is also very important, but this part is the thing that sets everything off, right? So an alert from the SIM or the EDR, or making sure that the SIM and the EDR are properly configured to even set off alerts. That's a very, very important distinction to make, because the SIM or the EDR could say, oh, there's nothing wrong, and it's because they're misconfigured, and all the alerts that should be getting triggered are actually going under the radar. So this is very, very important concept right here. So the alert from the SIM or the EDR. Now the configuration of the SIM and the EDR is usually done by the security engineer, not the security analyst. So you don't necessarily have to worry about it, but it is something that I would also look into. There's an entire playlist called Security Engineering that exists on this channel, and I would include that in your studies if you're interested in being a cybersecurity professional. So the alert from the SIM and the EDR would set everything off, and then there would be reports generated by the users themselves, and then the anomalous behavior. So in impossible travel or high resource usage, these are also all signs that something is going on, right? So you look at the alert, and the alert itself could be that, hey, listen, this person logged in from China and their office is supposed to be in New York, and they logged in from China 30 minutes after they logged in from New York. It's like, okay, well, how is that possible? That's impossible for them to be able to travel from New York to China in 30 minutes. That just doesn't exist. So there's something wrong. Or a user reports that, hey, I think something is wrong. So these are all detections. And then, of course, there's the matching of the threat intelligence that would also take place. So all of these things can feed into the detection, and at the same time, they can emphasize each other's importance. You may be able to get an alert, you may be able to notice the anomalous behavior, and it matches threat intelligence. So all of these things can be standalone by themselves, or they can actually be a part of one alert that you've received, and it's all giving you all of the intel that you would need to say, I think there is something wrong, right? Something is going on. We need to pay attention to what's going on, and we need to escalate this immediately so that we can now analyze it. And so if you think that something is wrong, the very next step would be to confirm whether or not that thing is actually wrong. And you look at the scope of the affected systems or the affected users. Is it just one computer, one user, or is it a subnet that has 50 users inside of it and 50 computers inside of it? What is the scope of this specific attack? What is the root cause of this attack? Did somebody plug in something to their computer that they shouldn't have? Did they click on something? Did they visit a website? What happened that started this whole thing? What is the impact? What are we worried about? And hopefully you're not looking at data loss already. Hopefully you've detected it early enough that you're not seeing data being extracted or systems crashing. But the impact is what we're trying to prevent as well. So it's, maybe you've caught it early on, and based on what you saw in the MITRE attack, you're like, oh, you know what? I think they're trying to steal data. Or maybe they're just trying to move from one system to another one so that they can move from one network to another one and ultimately gain higher privileges to do some really bad damage. So whatever it is, you need to also be able to identify the impact that is supposed to be done or is actually being done, so you can really get an understanding of the end goal, the end game of these people that are attacking you, and exactly see what you need to prevent from taking place. And then there's the reconstruction of the timeline of the attacks, of the series of steps. At 8:15, they clicked on this link. At 8:25, the link downloaded this other thing. And then at 8:45, 5 systems were affected. Something like that, right? So it's the timeline of the activities starting from the root cause and then tracking what happened after that to see where things played out, at what time they played out, and if it all happened in a span of 15 minutes or if it happened across 5 days, right? That could actually be a thing as well, because the attackers may not have wanted to set off a lot of alerts, because when you have a lot of activity happening in a short period of time, it can set off alerts by itself. So maybe they didn't want to set off a lot of alerts. So all they did was, okay, we're just going to put some sleep timers on here. And, after an hour and a half, this is going to happen. After 3 hours, this is going to happen. And so that timeline is also very important so that you can understand what's going on. Because when they extend the timeline, they usually get past the security, and then they now get to actually take the action on their objectives and make lateral movement or steal data or encrypt something. So usually when it's being done fast, it sets off a lot of alerts. And when it's being done slow, it typically doesn't set off as many alerts, and you can evade the defenses. So that's why there's an entire category called defense evasion on the MITRE tactic list. So detection is often automated, analysis is human-driven and requires deep logs, and really, honestly, detection is technically automated because a SIM is doing it or an EDR is doing it. However, the configuration of those tools is done by a human being. So the configuration of the detection tool is done by a human being, and then analysis typically human-driven, and it requires deep logs and a deep search and things like that. And you can use an AI tool for it. For the most part, it is led by a human being, though. And after analysis comes triage and the creation of the actual timeline itself. So this is the process through which you can now prioritize something. Triage is something that is referred to a lot inside of the medical world. So when you're running an ER, one of the key things that you want is to triage every patient that comes in, and the people that are the closest to dying or the most emergent gets treated first. And that's what triage basically means. You're looking at everything that's coming in, and you're looking at the severity of what could potentially happen, and based on that, you will go ahead and prioritize everything. So the severity would be the score that you would get, and it would be the impact that it can have. So is it a crashing of all of our systems? Or is it a crashing of a system, let's say? So is the impact that they want to crash the system? And then the scope would be how many systems do they want to crash? So do they want to crash 5,500 systems? That's pretty severe, right? So that's a very high priority kind of a item. What is the urgency of this? Is this actually happening? Is this going on right now? Or are they in the very first reconnaissance step and we don't need to worry about it immediately? Do we need to drop everything and pay attention to what's going on, or do we have some time, right? So urgency plays a big role in your triage attempts as well. The confidence of detection. So are we sure that this is a true positive, or is it most likely a false positive? Because more often than not, you're going to deal with false positives. So one of the key things that you're going to have to do through your detection mechanisms is to make sure you decrease the number of false positives so that your team only analyzes true positives. And that's, again, a part of the detection configurations that are done. So confidence in detection helps you determine how urgent something can be, right? And how severe something can be. And then what are the resources that are available to handle the triage? What are the resources that are available that are going to be attacked? What are the resources that are available to respond to everything, assuming that it is a true positive and we need to now take care of this? What do we have at our fingertips? What do we have at our disposal that we can go ahead and use these things so that we can take care of the problem? So there needs to be some kind of a system that would be used to answer all of these questions and to figure out the responses to every single one of these bullets. This cannot be opinion-based and it cannot be preference-based. There needs to be a scoring system that is used by every single person in the Security Operations Center, and everybody should be doing this in a uniform manner. So, for example, is this a high, medium, or low severity? Do we need to take care of this right now? Is it high on the triage list or is it low on the triage list? Or are you going to use a framework like MITRE Attack Navigator to prioritize something? There needs to be some kind of a system. That's basically the point here. Whatever the system is, there has to be a system. There can't be, okay, go figure it out. That can't be the thing. That's a very, very dangerous thing to say to somebody. There needs to be some kind of guideline that they're following to be able to figure it out. And then from triage, we go into the creation of the timeline. So reconstructing the sequence of the events that were taking place and using things like centralized logs with actual time synchronization taking place, correlating the events across sources, so endpoints, networks, and cloud environments, and using tools like the Elastic Timeline or the Splunk Timeline or the Microsoft Sentinel Investigation Graph to help you actually do this, because a lot of these tools can map these things out. They can correlate these events to each other, and they can help you figure these things out. So the network time protocol is a very, very accurate source of this. It's like a very universal kind of central timeline that you can use to go ahead and execute these kinds of goals on your mission. And it is one of those things that can help correlate a lot of these events very well for you. If the events are not correlated in time, if the timeline is not created in time, then what happens is what happened to the MGM, for example. So this was in 2025. It was just last year where the MGM Resorts, a massive company, was held at ransom. And I lived in Vegas while it was happening, and I was kind of shocked that it was happening because I was also in security, and I'm like, I can't believe that it's happening against such a massive company. And the main reason behind it was specifically, like, really the root cause. Obviously, they were hacked and all these things, but the security team did not reconstruct the timeline well enough. They delayed their timeline, or I should say that they didn't reconstruct the timeline well, and as a result of that, their containment of the ransomware was also not done properly, and therefore the attackers were able to move laterally for days before actually encrypting everything. And this is really, 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 really crazy. For somebody to be able to move laterally for days inside of your network gives them an immense amount of reconnaissance power. They can try to do a bunch of Bloodhound, like sending Bloodhound to try to find the users that have the highest privileges, so then they can go ahead and encrypt the highest resources, the highest value assets, and really hold you at ransom. And then now you're screwed. You have to pay the ransom. And especially if they're inside of your network in a situation where, okay, now we're going to write a script on here, and the script is going to destroy all of their backups, and then we're going to put them at ransom. That's evil genius kind of tactics that were taking place. And it happened against a very large company that has a lot of assets. So as you can imagine, the damages were very severe. So these things are happening as recently as 2026, I'm sure. This is not something that just happens once in a while. This is happening regularly, and it happens against massive entities that you would assume have really, really strong teams in security, when in actuality, the teams themselves are just abiding by the commands that are being given to them, the instructions that are being given to them. And if they're not spending too much time on the creation of the timeline and trying to figure out what's going on, and they're more worried about I don't know, XYZ that seems to be irrelevant, if they're not focused on the right things, that's mostly because their management is telling them what to focus on. So it would have to be blamed on upper management, trying to find like the root cause, kind of as we were talking about. It's like, okay, well, what was the root cause of this security defense tactic? What was the root cause of your security posture, and why did you guys not take care of it in time when you should have? So it happens to the best of them, and it happens as recently as 2025, and probably it's currently happening as I'm even recording this. So this is not something that is a one-stop or a one-time thing. It happens regularly, and it happens against the biggest and best of them. All right, so just going to do a couple of flowchart examples or flowcharts and examples for you. The first one would be the basic incident response triage flowchart. So it's very, very quick. So, the alert was received. Is it a true positive? Validate. If it is a true positive, if the answer to that is yes, then okay, we're going to assess the severity, the scope, and the impact. And then we're going to assign a priority to it. This is either a high, medium, or low. If it is a high priority, then we're going to escalate it immediately and form the incident response team and begin containment. And then if it's medium or low, then you're going to queue it for analysis and document and monitor and try to figure out what else is going on. Just because it's medium or low does not mean that it can't graduate to a high severity. So this is one of those things that, again, this is a very dynamic environment. It's a live environment. So just because it starts out a certain way does not mean it's going to stay there. It is very likely that in a matter of minutes, it can become a high priority event. So document and monitor that thing is very, very important, and it needs to be done by probably the best people on the team. So it needs to still have priority. It's not like it doesn't have priority. We need to be watching it very closely to see which way it's going to go and what they're going to do and what we should be doing as a response. We should be preparing as a response. A lot of times if you try to take something out of play, like a medium or low severity kind of thing, if you try to take it out of play prematurely, then you alert the hackers and they become skittish, and they become paranoid, and it's like threatening a lion or putting a lion in the corner of a cage and walking up to the lion and trying to scare the lion, and now the lion is bound to do some really, really bad things that it probably would not have done had you just watched it to see what it's trying to do. So just because there's a lion, it doesn't mean that the lion is going to destroy you and it's going to destroy everything. If you threaten the lion, then there's a very good chance that the lion is going to attack you. So these things are important to think about when you're looking at hackers. Just because the severity seems low, just because the overall impact or something like that seems low or seems medium level, it does not mean that it can't graduate to a high severity or a critical severity in a span of a couple of minutes. So just keep that piece in mind. All right, so now looking at the timeline example here, so simplified phishing and ransomware. So the phishing email was delivered at 8:15. So notice that it's all happening on July 10th, right? So the phishing email was delivered at 8:15. At 8:20, the user clicked the link inside of the phishing email, and by extension, there was a payload that was downloaded by clicking that link. At 8:25, PowerShell executed and it ran a command. And then what? That's 8:25 to 9 would be 35 minutes, and then 45 minutes. So 45 minutes later, lateral movement via remote desktop protocol took place. And at 11:30, ransomware encryption began. So for a while, they were moving laterally and they were trying to figure what assets that they should encrypt. And at 11:30, they started encrypting those assets. So this is a basic timeline, super, super basic. It's very likely that this timeline, in a real world example, the timeline is going to be much longer and it might even be more complex. It might involve more steps, etc. But it is the basic example of how you should be tracking this. The very, very root cause was the email was delivered and then the user clicked on it and the PowerShell executed, etc. And all of these things should have times associated with them. A lack of this kind of an activity is something that could lead to the MGM Grand Resort attack, where it's like they didn't have the timeline in place. They didn't look at what the root cause was. They didn't look at what these people have been doing for days when they're just moving laterally through our systems. They didn't pay attention to these kinds of things. And the next thing you know, after days of lateral movement, ransomware was actually executed. So it's very important. It's a very simple concept, but it's a very important concept, and it's a very detail-oriented concept. It requires an analytical eye. And now we get to episode 8, chapter 8's practice questions. There will be multiple choice questions. There will be some scenarios that we're going to share in here, and they are not going to be identical. I mentioned that at the beginning of every single set of questions. They're not going to be identical to what you're going to see in the exam, mainly because it is illegal for us to actually distribute the exam questions, and you will sign an NDA when you take the exam. So you're not allowed to distribute the actual questions, and the purpose and the spirit behind the questions that I'm going to share with you is to help you think, to learn how to think, to learn how to critically think and find the answers based on either process of elimination or paying attention to the actual details of the question and figuring out what would be the most obvious answer. So these are things that are all going to help you when you take any kind of an exam. Pay attention to the actual question to see what the question is actually asking you, and then from there, the responses themselves should kind of stand out. If you miss a specific detail of the question, which I've actually done, if you miss a specific detail of the question, then you'll think that you have the right answer and then you choose the wrong answer. So I've done that before, and it's not above anybody. I think anybody can actually do that. It's because a lot of times we get cocky and we think that we're doing really, really well, and all of a sudden we let our guards down. So keep your guards up. Make sure you pay attention to everything. Let's get into it. The first question is, which framework is best for mapping the relationships between adversary infrastructure capability and victim? So the cyber kill chain gave us the steps from reconnaissance all the way to attack on objectives. The MITRE attack framework is actually really great for doing all of these things, but if they're asking us this 4-step kind of mechanism here, that would be the diamond model. The NIST, this is technically a framework, but it's not what we're talking about for this concept. So this is kind of like one of those things meant to distract us. So it's definitely not cyber kill chain, and it's not MITRE attack. So the answer could only be the diamond model. In CS0-004, detection and analysis are treated as separate but overlapping phases. The same activity, only relevant in containment, optional for small incidents. Definitely not optional, so that's not true. Anytime that I see the word only, I automatically say that it's not true, because it's very rare, very, very rare that the answer will actually include the word only in it. So definitely not true. The same activity, no, because we know that they're actually separated. So they're separate, but they're overlapping phases. Which MITRE attack technique corresponds to phishing email delivery? Okay, so I mentioned early on that the attack techniques you don't need to memorize, and this question is throwing that theory completely out of the water. The only way I would be able to figure this out is to say that, that to go look at the list. Another way that I could try to guess this would be that, I know that phishing is earlier on in the process, and if phishing is earlier on in the process, then I would choose the ID that is the lowest in numerical value, which would be B, which is 1059. So just through, that's a guess. That's like a really, really risky guess without actually pulling up the list. So I'm going to say 1059, and it's 1566. So clearly, I have no idea what the hell I'm talking about. So let's actually go look at MITRE, and let's see what they're talking about. Because phishing email delivery, that's so interesting that so I'm going to do show sub techniques just so I can expand everything on this page. And I'm going to do Control F, and I'm going to do phishing email. Nope, phishing. So let's look at the first one. Phishing for information. Spear phishing service is what we have on the left-hand side right here. And then phishing attached, spear phishing attachment link via service, voice. All of those things are here as well. Where's the rest of it? There needs to be more that's on here. So why there's so many, you guys, there's so many stuff that's on here. It's kind of crazy. Okay, so let's go to the very top. So the first one would be phishing for information, phishing service, so 1598. And is the answer 1598? It's 1566. Okay, so it's not any of these then. So we would go to next one, next one, next one, next one, next one, and this would be 1566. And this is for what exactly? Initial access delivery. So spear phishing attachment link via service. So what's the question asking here? It's saying corresponds to phishing email delivery. That's a very generic question. You're not going to get a question like that. That is too obscure of a question. You will not get a question like this. It's not to say that you shouldn't know what these things are, but you will not get a question like this. And I'm kind of shocked that this is even included in our list of questions. The cyber kill chain where the attacker establishes persistent access is the cyber kill chain stage, the cyber kill chain stage where the attacker establishes persistent access is. So it's not reconnaissance, because that's the very first one. It's not exploitation, and it's not actions on objectives. I think it would be through installation where they would establish persistent access. Actions on objectives is things like, it could actually be persistence, I want to say. I want to say, I'm going to say D, but my first thing was installation. I'm going to say D. Oh my God, it was installation. Gosh. Action on objectives is typically encrypting data or exfiltrating data, doing something like that. Establishing persistence would be more through installation. That was my first guess too. Gosh, oh my gosh. Triage is primarily concerned with detailed forensic analysis, prioritizing incidents based on severity and urgency. That stands out. Eradicating malware, no. Writing executive reports, no. So primarily, it's concerned with prioritizing incidents based on severity and urgency. In timeline creation, what is the most critical prerequisite for accurate event correlation? So the critical prerequisite for accurate event correlation: high resolution packet capture, real-time threat intel feeds, credentialed access to every system, accurate time synchronization across all sources. That's probably the most obvious answer. You don't need credentialed access to every system. Real-time threat intelligence feeds can be helpful, but they don't have anything to do with timeline creation for your incident response environment. High resolution packet capture also doesn't really need that much of a, we don't need high resolution stuff. We just need accurate times. So accurate time synchronization has to do with timeline creation. Which attack from recent years heavily used the T1190 technique for exploiting public-facing applications? And that was the one where it was MOVEit. It was the transfer 0 day, because the SolarWinds supply chain was a supply chain thing. They weren't using a public-face application. The Colonial Pipeline ransomware was through a phishing email, and the WannaCry worm was also something that was not done through a public-facing application. That's also a really cool thing to go ahead and study if you haven't heard of it before. So my response would be the B, MOVEit transfer 0 day. Yeah. The diamond model is particularly used for linear attack progression, understanding adversary-victim relationships, patch management, log ingestion. Definitely not log ingestion, definitely not patch management. And it's not a linear progression of the attack. It's the understanding of the adversary-victim relationships, which would be the diamond model. A high severity alert with active lateral movement should be triaged as high priority, immediate escalation. It's high severity, right? And they're doing active lateral movement. This should actually be high priority, immediate escalation. Deferred for the next shift is definitely not the answer. And it's not medium or low, because it's a high severity alert and they're actively moving laterally through the organization. So I would say high priority, yeah. Which framework stage would actions on objectives correspond to in a ransomware attack? So actions on objectives, which framework stage would that correspond to in a ransomware attack? So, data encryption. There we go. Okay, so reconnaissance is one of the stages. So that's not the answer. Exploitation is also one of the stages. Installation is also one of the stages. So the action on objective stage corresponds to this activity. So data encryption and ransomware node is an action. When mapping a phishing campaign to MITRE attack, the initial email is typically staged as, okay, this is what you would probably see. They're not going to just send you the IDs, right? You would probably see something like this. And so the initial email is typically tagged as phishing. It's not going to be commanding scripting. It's not going to be application layer protocol, data encrypted, none of that stuff. It's phishing. It's like a very obvious answer. In the SolarWinds attack, which was a supply chain attack, which framework would best illustrate the supply chain compromise entry point? The cyber kill chain, weaponization delivery, the diamond model adversary infrastructure, MITRE attack, T1195, all of the above. The question is asking best illustration of the supply chain compromise entry point, and I'm inclined to say A. D is very tricky because it's like, well, no, it can't be D because we're looking for the best illustration of the entry point of the supply chain compromise. And my answer would be A. MITRE attack T1195, I'm going to guess it has to do with supply chain attacks because I have not memorized them, so I'm not sure. But I don't think that's it either. So I'm going to say A. I am understanding that I might be wrong, but I'm going to say A. It's all of the above. Wow. How? What? My goodness. It's not. Okay. That's not okay. All right. This can't be a right answer. I'm just saying. And, I have heard other people say that the questions sometimes can actually have wrong answers, and they've submitted reports to say that this is the wrong answer and things like that. So I have heard that. And I think that does actually happen. In this particular case, that cannot be the answer. I can't imagine that would be the answer because they're saying which framework would best illustrate the supply chain compromise entry point. Like, it can't be all of the above. So, okay, let's go look at T1195 on MITRE attack. Let's see what specifically that is. So T1195, it doesn't even exist. Okay, that's insane. Oh, because it's not on the page like that. Okay, fine. Okay, fine. I was like, this doesn't, what? T1195, that's supply chain compromise technique. Okay, fine. For a second, I was like, bruh, what? No, okay, so it does exist, obviously, and is a sub-technique, or it has 3 sub-techniques: compromise software dependencies, supply chain. Fine. It does exist, fine. But I don't know, that can't be the answer. That's, all right. You know what? Whatever. Okay. I got it wrong. All right. I got 2 questions wrong. This is bad. I don't like getting questions wrong. Scenario, you receive an alert, user logged in from Germany at 3, then from California at 3:15. This is an impossible travel for sure. So it says, what is this likely an indicator of? Impossible travel. Which MITRE attack technique would you map it to? Would you triage this incident? I would contact the user, see whether or not they actually are traveling. Obviously they're not, because it can't be possible for them to log in from 3 o'clock and then 3:15. I would see if they're using some kind of a VPN or a remote connection somewhere. I would then go ahead and block off the user. I would go ahead and submit an analysis against their computer, see if their computer is connected against a subnetwork, see if we need to contain the subnetwork and disconnect it from the rest of the network. Yeah, it would be a good amount of activities that would be done, and this would be a high severity triage, in my opinion. I don't think we actually have an answer to this. No, we don't. So this is one of those things that I would just love to hear your feedback on this. So, this is most likely, I'm going to say the answer is definitely impossible travel. So that's definitely the indicator. Do a search and see which MITRE attack technique would that be mapped to, or which ones you think that would be mapped to. And then let me know how you would triage this incident. SIM alert shows PowerShell process spawning from a Word document. So that is essentially an attachable, or like an attachment, for example, that had macros inside of it. So inside of the macro of every single file, basically there's the path of where the file will be opening from, right? So the Word document, the Word logo, if you right click on it and if you look at its properties, there's going to be the path to the final executable. And the path to the final executable can be changed, and you can put the path of anything. You could put a command in there for anything. And so you could technically put a PowerShell command inside of the macros of a Word document. So it says map the behavior to MITRE attack techniques, at least 2 of them. So macro document, PowerShell process spawning can be, you can find it in a variety of different locations on MITRE attack. So we can go back to this again, and we can just show all of the sub techniques, and then we can search for PowerShell, and you'll see that there's going to be at least 3 different references. So we have PowerShell inside of execution, command and scripting interpreter, and then we also have event triggered execution, so PowerShell profile, that could be a thing, and then PowerShell profile also under event triggered execution. So I would say it's more likely an event triggered execution because they are opening a file. So when they open a file, a Word file, when they open the Word document, that's the event. The event is they open a document and now it's spawned PowerShell. So that would be the event, right? And then command execution would be the other one. Now, how this fits into the cyber kill chain, this is going into from reconnaissance. So if we go and pull up the Lockheed Martin cyber kill chain, if we pull this up, this is also a really fun way to look at it because you actually get to see the image and you get to see what's going on. So reconnaissance, harvesting email, weaponization, delivery, this would probably be it. It's like between weaponization and delivery is what's happening. The bundle via email, web, USB, something like that, exploiting vulnerability to execute code on the system. This could also be it. So I would say it's probably between delivery and exploitation somewhere, because they are now going to run the exploit, right? So that's what's happening. They've already delivered. So it's probably the Word document has already been delivered. The Word document has been opened, and now exploitation is taking place to execute code on the victim system. So that's exploitation is most likely the answer to that. And we have another one. You are building a timeline for a suspected ransomware incident. List 5 key log sources you would correlate. Describe 2 tools and features for timeline visualization. So Elastic and Splunk timeline, those would be the 2 tools. 5 key logs for a suspected ransomware incident. So we want to look at the network logs. We want to look at the sys logs. We want to look at the firewall logs. We want to look at application logs. And we want to look at, what else can we look at? Probably the individual logs from that individual computer. So let's say the endpoint logs from the originating point. So it would be the endpoint detection logs, there would be the network logs, the application logs, the firewall logs, and the sys logs. That would show us a good amount of data. Sys logs include security logs, so you can say security logs, authentication logs, something. There are so many different log sources that you could refer to that you can try to pull data from it so you can correlate the events that have taken place. The SIM tool can help you do that. And it could be Elastic, it could be Splunk. They both have the tools for visualizing the timeline. So those would be the resources that I would use. But again, for this one, as well as this one, as well as this one, I really do want to hear from you in the comments. So go ahead and drop a comment and let me know how you would approach these questions. And that's pretty much it. And so we are now going to prepare for the next chapter, the next episode, which is the containment to recovery activities for incident response. As usual, you can get the note that I'm using, so the book that I'm actually using that will be available for all of our Hackaholics Anonymous members. You can get that. You can get the practice question slideshow that we just went through, as well as the MITRE attack matrix PDF, the incident response triage template, the timeline creation guide. You will get all of those as downloads exclusive to Hackaholics Anonymous by joining Hackaholics Anonymous. And they're all available in the members area, and links to them will be distributed inside of our members community on the YouTube homepage. And with all of that, Chapter 8 will be complete, and we're going to be ready to go into Chapter 9. So if you're a member of Hackaholics Anonymous already, these things are already available to you, and you can go and get access to them. If you are not, I would urge you to consider joining our lovely membership community. If you found value in this video, then I would encourage you to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so that you get notified the next time that a video comes out on this channel, especially as we complete the CYSA Plus training list, as well as the CompTIA Pentest Plus, AI for Cybersecurity, the SOC Level 1 for 2026, which is the updated version of SOC Level 1 training. All of those things are taking place right now. Offensive pen testing, all of those things. So to get access to them, to not to get access to them, because it will be available to you no matter what. All the content on the channel will forever be free. But to get notified when they come out, make sure that you like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell. If you have any comments about what we went through, especially if you are willing to answer the scenario-based questions, then I would encourage you to drop a comment below as well and let me know how you would approach those questions. And if you have any questions about anything else that we talked about, make sure you drop a comment below as well. So to get all of the notifications, make sure you like, subscribe, turn on notification. And to get the downloads, to get the book that we use, to get the practice questions, all the exclusive downloads, the scripts that I've developed so far for the previous episodes that we've done, there's a lot of Python scripts that most likely will come out of this, and all of the extra bells and whistles and all the goodies that is available for all the previous courses that we've done. Everything. There's so many things that come as a part of the Hackaholics Anonymous membership. So I urge you to consider joining Hackaholics Anonymous. To get access to the CYSA Plus book, the practice questions, the exclusive episode downloads, and to get access to the CompTIA Linux Plus, Network Plus, Pentest Plus, and Security Plus course contents, and to get access to me via Discord plus all the future perks and content rollouts, consider joining Hackaholics Anonymous. We have 4 tiers: the supporter, agent, guardian, and master. Each tier gets their own Discord server and early access to content. The agent, guardian, and master levels get exclusive content, exclusive downloads, monthly Python automations, live streams with me every month, plus so much more. And to join, you can simply click the link in the description below. It's the link that says Join Hackaholics Anonymous. I look forward to seeing you in the Discord chats. If not, I look forward to seeing you in the comment section. Until then, happy hacking and stay out of trouble. It's your boy Hank Hackerson at Hank Hacks Hackers, your favorite network and system attacker / protector. If no one else loves you, Hank loves you. Love, peace, and chicken grease, and I will see you in the next video later. In episode 9 of the CompTIA CySA Plus training series, we are going to go through the incident response activities for containment and recovery. My name is Hank Hackerson, your trainer for today, and to get more videos like this one, make sure that you like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell. In the last episode, we talked about the frameworks that we would use for incident response, and we actually are going to do a quick little recap of them real quick in a couple of slides here. But in this episode, we're going to be talking about specific activities, namely containment and recovery. And containment, as the name implies, is when you contain something from further spreading, and then recovery, as the name implies, takes us back to business as usual. So we'll be getting into the details of those specific concepts. And really, the whole goal is to give you more of a framework, to give you more step-by-step guidance on what you should be doing and how you should be going through the various actions that you got to take, right? So it shouldn't be something that you would have to implement guesswork or anything like that. It should be something that you're like, okay, well, I'm going to do A, B, C through all the way through Z, you know what I mean? Or 1 through 10, whatever the phraseology is, whatever the methodology is. That is what it should be like in every single cybersecurity environment, whether you're in security analysis or you're actually in incident response or you're doing security engineering or you're doing digital forensics or pen testing. It really shouldn't really make that much of a difference, because there should always be some kind of a checklist that you're going to follow. And as long as you have the checklist, as long as you have some kind of a guideline, then you're free to be creative within the bounds of that checklist and that guideline. So the action phase of incident response is where the real SOC analysts earn their actual paychecks. Once the incident has been detected, analyzed, triaged, and scoped, it's time to contain, eradicate, and recover, and escalate when necessary, and set up continuous monitoring to catch any re-entry attempts. And then you kind of go back to the very, very beginning of the process where you actually start doing detection and analysis and triage. So it never really ends. It's just this continuous loop. And sometimes within that loop, you actually catch something, and then you got to contain it, eradicate it, and recover your systems, and then go back to the beginning. So that's basically what it's like, and that's what we're going to be covering. CySA-0-04 places emphasis on everything we talked about so far, and then there's an added focus on the clear separation and sequencing of containment going into eradication, going into recovery, the escalation procedures, who, when, and how, and post-incident continuous monitoring. So again, there's never going to be an instance where it's, all right, one and done, we're finished. It just doesn't exist in cybersecurity or any kind of tech. As you should already know, tech is constantly evolving. So when you think you've learned everything, there's a new evolution and an update or a new system coming out, and now you got to start back from the learning phase. So it's never going to end. It's a never-ending cycle. So just keep that piece in mind. And we're going to be looking at realistic step-by-step decision-making under pressure. And this is the key piece right here. And this is where more people fail than anything else. It's whether or not you can deal with pressure, and whether or not you are good under pressure is what will determine if you're going to actually thrive in incident response, or if you're even going to go into incident response, right? So this is what we're going to be talking about in this specific episode and on this chapter of the book. There is a difference between contained incident and a multi-million-dollar breach, and it all often comes down to these specific steps that we talk about here, as well as the previous slide that we went into. So the very first one is going to be containment mode. First, we're going to do a quick little introduction to Hackaholics Anonymous in case you have not been introduced to our membership community. Then we're going to do a recap of the last episode, and then we're going to go into containment mode. To get access to the CYSA Plus book, the practice questions, the exclusive episode downloads, and to get access to the CompTIA Linux Plus, Network Plus, PenTest Plus, and Security Plus course contents, and to get access to me via Discord plus all the future perks and content rollouts, consider joining Hackaholics Anonymous. We have 4 tiers: the Supporter, Agent, Guardian, and Master. Each tier gets their own Discord server and early access to content. The Agent, Guardian, and Master levels get exclusive content, exclusive downloads, monthly Python automations, live streams with me every month, plus so much more. And to join, you can simply click the link in the description below. It's the link that says Join Hackaholics Anonymous. I look forward to seeing you in the Discord chats. If not, I look forward to seeing you in the comment section. Until then, happy hacking and stay out of trouble. The recap of episode 8, our very last episode, was these key frameworks, these 3 key frameworks. There are other frameworks, just to be clear. It's just that on the CYSA-0-04 examination, these 3 were given extra emphasis. And so we have the cyber kill chain, which is by Lockheed Martin, and it's the linear progression, best for containment strategy and breaking the chain early on, assuming that you can actually catch it early on. And depending on the type of attack that's taking place, depending on the attacker, they may be coming into the kill chain at different phases. But the earlier you can catch them, the better it would be. There's already a video on cyber kill chain, actually multiple videos on cyber kill chain on this channel. So if you want to get a further in-depth education on it, I would encourage you to watch those videos. Diamond model would be the next one, and we actually have a video on, if you watched episode 8, you know that Google Gemini actually gave us a shout out inside of the breakdown of the diamond model, and it actually gave a link to the video on this channel. So I'm very confident on this video because literally Google Gemini was referencing it and recommending it as something to watch. The diamond model shows you the relationship between adversary victim capability and infrastructure, and it guides the eradication targeting. So this is more a back and forth type of a relationship, whereas the cyber kill chain is more a linear progression. And then we have the MITRE attack matrix and the MITRE attack map and navigator. And there's also multiple videos on MITRE attack, and MITRE attack is very, very good on tactics, techniques, and procedures. They're also really good at showing you the various groups that have previously attacked different entities in the world and the softwares that they used, the TTPs that they used, etc. So very, very profound, kind of a prolific destination for you to be able to find a lot of cyber threat intelligence, and I highly recommend it. I visit it frequently, especially in recording mode, when I'm actually recording and trying to find more information for different videos and to expand on certain topics. I always refer to the MITRE attack matrix and the attack navigator. It helps identify persistence mechanisms and eradication targets, just to name a few. There are a lot of different things that MITRE helps us do, but for the context of our conversation for incident response and for recovery and containment, it talks about persistence mechanisms and eradicating targets and all of those good things as well. So we use these frameworks to inform what to contain, what to eradicate, and how to verify recovery. And as an example, if the attack map shows that T1543, which is the creation or modification of system processes, then you can look for scheduled tasks, services, and startup items during eradication. So if the attack map, when you're doing your incident response, you notice that this ID is referenced in your reports, and that ID maps to this specific process. If that's the case, you can go and look at this ID, read all of the details, and you'll notice in the details that it says, hey, in the creation or modification of system processes, they do schedule tasks a lot, they do service creation a lot, and they look at startup items a lot. And so if these are the main procedures that are used for something like this, then that's what you want to look out for as you're going through your incident response process for containment and eradication. So these are very, very important concepts to keep in mind, and these frameworks would be used regularly when you're going through incident response procedures. It's just, whether or not you actually go into incident response would be more of your choice when you go into cybersecurity. But you definitely have to know about them, because even if you're not on the incident response team, you will have to work with the incident response team. So creating reports to give them so that their job is easier and they can do their job faster is also very, very important. So whether or not you're in IR, you have to work with IR, which means that you should know about IR. All right, so there are 3 core activities in incident response. We have containment, eradication, and recovery. In the previous episode, we talked about the detection and analysis and triage and all of that stuff. But the core activities of incident response after you've done triage and you know that there is actually something malicious going on, the first step would be to contain it, to stop the bleeding, limit the spread of the worm or the malware or the ransomware, whatever it is. You need to contain it and stop it from spreading. Think about it as doing a quarantine when somebody has a spreadable disease and they put the person inside of this air-sealed room, and whoever goes inside of that room, they wear these hazmat suits so that they don't get whatever the disease is, etc. So this is very similar to that, except we're trying to do it in a digital environment. So there's a clear sequence between these 3 steps inside of the 0-4 examination, and if you do them out of order, you risk reinfection. So it's very, very important to understand that. If you try to eradicate something before you've determined whether it's been contained and what the actual scope is and how many systems have actually been infected, if you try to do the eradication prematurely, then there will be certain systems that may escape, and then they'll go ahead and respread. And so containment is the first step. And a lot of times the containment will not be to a single system, it will be to a network segment, because more often than not, it will have spread from at least one system to multiple systems. And what you're really trying to do is see if it has spread to multiple segments of your network. So the containment strategy, or the containment step, is a short-term step. It isolates the affected systems, network segmentation, disabling accounts, blocking malicious IP addresses and domain names. And the long-term version of it would be to have strategic containment. So remove compromised credentials altogether, patch entry vectors altogether, segment off specific portions of your network that really have sensitive files or sensitive systems in there, and keep them completely separate from the rest of your network segments, and make the entrance to these network segments much harder. Make it so that there needs to be layered entrance mechanisms where you have to use a specific IP address, and you have to go through VPN, and you have to do it by a certain username, etc., etc., and there needs to be multi-factor authentication, all of those things in order to even be able to access that segment of the network. The goal of containment is to prevent further damage while preserving evidence. So this is very, very important. So before eradication, right? So this is very important. Before eradication, you want to prevent further damage and then preserve evidence. This is important for the next team that will come in. So as I mentioned, there will be the security analysis team that will create certain reports that the incident response team will use. But once the incident response team is done, they have to pass off their reports to the digital forensics team. And the digital forensics team needs evidence. They need artifacts that are inside of the environment. They need as much information as possible to do forensics, to do investigations and figure out what happened so that they can prevent it from happening again. And then also, if there needs to be court proceedings and legal litigation and all of those things, you also need that evidence to show up in court. And that evidence should be as unaltered as possible. There should be no tampering with that evidence as possible. So that is the goal of containment. Now we're going to talk about eradication. So eradication is when you remove the root cause and any other infected elements of that original eradicated portion. So the if the initial system patient 0, if patient 0 is where it started, you definitely want to address patient 0, but you also need to know which other systems were affected, which other segments of your network were affected, and make sure that you remove everything from every place that you possibly can, so there is no remaining elements of that. There's no sign of that disease or that infection inside of your network and inside of your systems. This is very, very important, because even the smallest hint, the smallest sign of that initial worm or that initial virus being in your systems can be enough for it to take root again and spread again. So it's very, very important to do this part extremely well and do very detail-oriented, kind of obsessive-compulsive kind of a orientation of the removal and the eradication, so that you can make sure that it doesn't spread. So that means to delete malware and all of the backdoors that the malware was able to use. That means to remove persistence mechanisms. So any registry keys, scheduled tasks, malicious accounts that were created, patch or mitigate the entry vector, so how they came in. Try to figure out exactly what that was and make sure that it's not used again to re-enter, right? Re-image or redeploy systems if necessary, which will most likely be necessary, which goes to the conversation of backups, which we'll be talking about when we talk about recovery specifically. But you need to have constant backups, you need to have regular backups, and preferably you need to have redundant systems in place. So while you're doing all of this, at the very least you have a redundant system that has not been affected because the redundant system was not connected to the network, and you can put up the redundant system so that your business can continue as usual. If you have been able to contain it and you know exactly where it's residing and it hasn't spread past a certain point, then you can actually use your redundant systems. But if you are not sure where it's contained to, then don't connect any new systems, because then it can spread to the new systems. So that part's very important as well. But this is why we need to have backups. We need to have regular backups of the disk images. We need to have backups of our systems and all of the files and everything that have the highest integrity, that have not been messed with by the virus or by the malware or anything like that, so that we can go back to the way that everything was yesterday. You know what I mean? If you do your backups monthly, then the last healthy backup that you have is from a month ago, which means that you've lost all of the work for the last 30 days or for the last 2 weeks or something like that. And that's obviously not a good place to be in. So you want to have regular backups, you want to have daily backups and daily versions of the healthy systems. And when you go back to try to find what that initial, and this would all have been done during the analysis and triage process where you actually put your timelines in place. And when you find where the initial entry was and where the initial hack was, then you can say, okay, anything before that date, we can be confident that it was not malicious activity or there wasn't any kind of malware in our systems. So we can use any of our disk images from before that date and use them as our backup point to go back to, healthy system environments. And that ties directly into recovery, which is the restoration of your operations. And the key word here is safely. So you want to return systems to production if you can, from clean backups, assuming that you have clean backups that are recent. You want to monitor closely for signs of reinfection and make sure that it doesn't spread immediately or within the next week or something like that. And you want to validate business processes are actually fully installed and everything is running smoothly so that the business can continue to operate. This specific element right here requires the previous elements to be done correctly, which is why we said that it's not, you can't go into recovery before you've done eradication. You can't go into recovery before you've done containment, right? So you need to get to recovery assuming that you've done your containment properly and assuming you've done eradication properly, and you can safely go into recovery. That's very, very important. And a part of that is for all of the steps before containment to also be done well. So the detection and the analysis and the triage and putting the timetables together and the time correlation of saying, okay, this whole thing started from this date at this time, so that we can rest assured that everything prior to that date and time is actually a healthy system, so we can restore to those systems prior to that date. They all rely upon each other. All of these things depend on the previous steps being done correctly, so that finally when we get to recovery, we can actually be sure that we're recovering our systems to an environment that is no longer infected and there will not be reinfection taking place. So it's very, very important to do everything in sequence, and it's very important to do everything correctly. Now, to reference back for the ransomware attack that we used as an example in the previous episode, the MGM Grand, as recent as 2025, was hacked, and they were hacked for several days, and the attackers were moving for several days after they started to encrypt all of their systems and they held them at ransom. So number one, the time correlation was done incorrectly. So that was the last reference that we made to this example. In the previous video, we were talking about the MGM Resort ransomware and how the time correlation for the triage and the analysis was done incorrectly, and it was done so slow so that the attackers were able to roam around in their systems for several days. But then there was the other part, was that obviously containment was really slow and the attackers were remaining active for days before they finally started to encrypt all of their systems. So the poor segmentation of those systems allowed for lateral movement, meaning the attackers could just go back and forth and initiate lateral movement between as many systems as they wanted. So there are several lessons. This particular story gives us so many different lessons, and we have to learn from those mistakes. So, detect them quickly, respond to the detection quickly, analyze the timestamps quickly, treat it seriously. Don't think that it's not a big deal if you just think that one person is hacked in and maybe they hacked into a low-level system, so you're not worried about what they could do. Make sure that your networks are segmented. The network segmentation is so key. Make sure that critical systems that hold critical data is segmented. Make sure that network isolation is done immediately. Containment is done immediately to prevent the spreading of that ransomware from taking place. Because if the ransomware encrypts the data that is the most critical data, the data that actually your entire operation relies on, if that data is encrypted, now your operation can't continue, which is exactly what happened to the MGM Resorts. Their entire operations were out of order for several weeks, And it was a terrifying thing. Their elevators weren't working, their slot machines weren't working. There was customer data, the payment data of the customers were encrypted and stolen. There were so many things. As it was pretty much as bad as it could have been. It was like the worst nightmare of somebody who's in the security field. And it's something that happened to a massive organization as recently as 2025. So it's one of those things that should be a sobering moment for everybody. It should be something that we all think about and we all keep in mind, and we remind ourselves so that we don't make these mistakes over and over and over again. We don't make the mistakes that other people have made. And at the very least, we should be doing proper network segments, and we should be very quick to contain something and very quick to address something and pay attention to all of the finer details. So that is the lesson of MGM Resort's ransomware attack. Once you have done your core activities, or maybe even in the middle of those core activities, the steps that you need to address would be to escalate something to the higher ups and to maybe specific teams that have specialty skills. So the escalation procedures are also a very important part of incident response activities. So the first question is, when do you escalate? And to whom do you escalate? And all of these things should be, again, inside of the playbooks within your company. If you are in the situation where you're a part of a very small team that does not have these procedures in place, it should be something that you take upon yourself, that you actually put these procedures in place. So the severity threshold that has been crossed, right? So that would be the first thing that would say, okay, if this happens, right, if we cross this severity threshold, then we need to escalate. And that could be data exfiltration, ransomware encryption, executive compromise. So data exfiltration is very, very simple to understand. Data is being stolen. Data is being extracted out of our network. Ransomware encryption is we start noticing that certain systems are now being encrypted and there's a ransomware message popping up. Executive compromise is that we notice that one of our executives' accounts, their user profile, has now been compromised. These are all very clear thresholds that all imply severity. They imply very high severity situation. Data is being stolen, we're being held at ransom, executive information is being stolen, things like that. Then there's the legal and regulatory reporting that is required, and you would need to escalate to somebody that is inside of the legal team, or somebody that's inside of the compliance team, or maybe even the PR, the public relations team. They probably should be involved as well, because you need to deliver this to the public and you need to let them know what's happened. So things like the GDPR, which is basically any website that is online, has to abide by GDPR. It's the General Data Protection Regulation, and it was founded in California to protect California residents. But what happens is, if you have a website that's online, there has to be something, at some point, something will happen where somebody from California is going to visit your website. That's the World Wide Web. That's how it works. So you could be in the European Union, but somebody from California could visit your website, and you need to abide by GDPR. The SEC 4-day rule of material incidents, so the SEC's 4-day rule for material incidents. So if it gets past the 4-day limitation that they've set for something that has to do with a material change inside of your company, or material information, intellectual property that will actually have real world implications against your clients or against your shareholders, whatever it is, the Security Exchange Commission actually has a rule in place that if it passes 4 days, there needs to be reporting that needs to be done, and people need to be aware of what's going on. So the legal compliance and public relations teams need to be notified, and the situation needs to be escalated to them. And then we have the resource constraints. So do you need an external incident response team? Because the internal force can't handle what's going on, right? We have a really small team. We don't even have an incident response team, right? We don't only have a security analysis team. So we're using a third-party company to take care of our incident response needs. Maybe that's what's happening. Maybe your internal IR team is small and they can't handle it, or they're inexperienced and they can't handle it. Whatever it is, there would be resource constraints that then require somebody from the outside to come in to help you. And that also counts as escalation. And then finally, we have the C-suite involvement. So the CEO, CISO, CFO, CTO, all these people need to be notified of what's going on if it's gone to a really big level. So for example, if the company, MGM Grand, right? If MGM Grand as a whole is being held at ransom, obviously the CEO, CISO, CTO, all of those people need to be informed. They need to be brought in, that they're like, hey, listen, our company is being held at ransom and we failed, right? You have to own up to it. Somebody will probably get fired in that entire interaction, and it's something that needs to be addressed. And I mean, I'm more of the school of thought where it's like, you should let them know earlier than later. You shouldn't be telling them super late in the process, because they might have access to resources that you don't even know of, and they might know things that you don't know, so that they can probably help you do things better, faster, and more effectively, right? So if that is the case, the first level, the first person in the C-suite would be the CISO, the Chief Information Security Officer. That's kind of their part, that's their area of expertise. I was looking for a fancy word and I couldn't find the fancy word. Their forte, is it the forte? I don't know, but it's their area of expertise. Their job is literally Chief Information Security Officer. So at the very least, the CISO need to be informed, as well as the people that are serving right under them. All of those people need to be informed so that they're aware. The CISO's job is to keep the information security of the entire company safe. And so if that's the case, they most likely, more than likely, like 99.9% of the time, they know things you don't know, because they are the Chief Information Security Officer. They know things you don't know. They know people you don't know. They can make moves that you don't know how to make. And so if it's something that is out of your control, do not try to fix it yourself, because the longer that you wait, the worse it will become for the company. So you need to bring in somebody who's more skilled. So go to your immediate supervisor. If the immediate supervisor can't do it, they'll go to their supervisor, and then it'll go continually up the chain. And worst case scenario, the CISO will be brought in. And that's a better environment than waiting too late and informing everybody too late, and then the damage being catastrophic, and now you're going to lose your job because you waited too long. So it's very, very important to be safe, right? Be safe. Safe is better than sorry, kind of a thing. So the typical escalation matrix, right? The way that these things are done would be that the tier 1 analyst notices the alert. Then they would refer to the tier 2 analyst. And then the tier 2 analyst, if they can't handle it, they will refer to the incident response manager or the security director. And we are still technically inside of the security operations center while all of this is happening. If the incident response manager can't handle it, they will refer to the CISO, the legal team, and the executive team. And then the CISO will then address the board members and the regulators if required. So you see it goes up the chain. Tier 1 goes to tier 2, tier 2 goes to the immediate management, management goes into the chief management, and chief management will go into the rest of the board and inform the CFO and the CEO and the CMO, the chief marketing officer. Like, you need to tell the CCO, the chief compliance officer, you need to tell everybody, hey, this just happened. We need to address this before word spreads and we're on the defensive. We need to go on the attack and take control of the narrative, right? So it's very, very important. And throughout this whole thing, the key element is to document everything. Create very detailed reports, your decision for escalation, your reasoning behind your escalation, and who you communicated with, how you communicated with them, what you communicated. You need to document everything, timestamp everything. Make sure that it's all addressed. Make sure that it's all on record. So if anybody comes to you and says, what did you do? Why did you do it this way? You're not trying to come off the top of your head. You know exactly what to say to address what you did and why you did it, when you did it, who you said it to, all of that stuff. Assuming that you've done everything correctly, then you go into continuous monitoring. So assuming that you did everything pre-containment. So you did your analysis, your triage, your reporting, all of that stuff. You did the detection, all of that stuff correctly. Then you did containment, you did eradication, and you did recovery correctly. You escalated to the right people. Everything seems to be operating as normal. All the systems seem to be fine. Okay, no problem. That's all great. Now we're going to continually monitor and be on edge, for lack of a better word. Like, you need to be on alert for what's going on, just to make sure that you are not celebrating prematurely, right? It's like that you're never out of the woods. This is the thing. It's not, oh, we're finally out of the woods. That does not exist, right? The first attack that they did towards you may have been just to see how you respond, and just to see where your weaknesses are in your response. So when we're looking at the MGM Grand situation, the attack was maybe, one of the big things that they learned was that, we were in these systems for days before they even noticed and before they even did anything. So there, that team, and I am certain that that team has been replaced, because people have to be fired. Like, it's insane for something to be going on for days. Either you were careless or you didn't have the skills to notice what's going on. And so if that's the case, you should be fired. I'm sorry, it sounds heartless, but that's what it needs to be. There needs to be a certain level of accountability that takes place, because the damage is catastrophic, and it's literally your job to notice these things. So post-containment and eradication, you do not just declare victory and you start celebrating. You don't do that. You continuously monitor everything. Continuous monitoring, days, 2 weeks, looks for the reappearance of indicators of compromise, any new lateral movement, any new systems that seem to be with viruses or infected, command and control reestablishment, meaning a remote control, again, somebody logged in remotely, behavioral anomalies, so again, impossible travel, they logged in from New York and then they logged in from Russia. It's like, well, that's impossible, right? And they did it in a span of 15 minutes. That's impossible. Somebody is connecting to us remotely. Unusual process execution. On this computer, by this user, why are they launching PowerShell? You know what I mean? Why is the new person that is serving as a grunt in the marketing department, why is that person launching PowerShell? There's something wrong, right? That's unusual for this person's role, for this person's skill set. They should not even be launching PowerShell. I reference this all the time, right? So when I started at one of my first jobs right after I got into cybersecurity and I got into system administration, I was still working a sales job. And one of the first things that I did was I was like, oh, I'm on a Windows machine. Let me see if I can open up PowerShell. And I opened up PowerShell. And that by itself should have been an alert, and they should have prevented me opening up PowerShell manually. That should be, because they can do that. They can say, hey, you know what? You're not allowed to open PowerShell. Why are you opening PowerShell? That is something that should have been limited, but they didn't limit it, and I was still able to do it. And then ultimately I started creating automations through PowerShell to make my life easier. And that's something that I didn't do maliciously. I did it to actually help my job. But just writing a PowerShell script and having a PS1 file, that should be an alert. It's like, why is this user that's in sales creating a PS1 file? What are you doing? Somebody should at least have reached out to me. Nobody did. It was a very big company too. And it's just like, why is this even happening? Okay, so the tools that can be used to help us with this is an enhanced SIM. So the SIM itself is amazing, but having the newly configured rules inside of our SIM to detect anything that may happen like this, right? So watch these specific user accounts to see if they're going to have impossible travel again. Watch any sign of lateral movement. Watch for these indicators of compromise for these IP addresses, for these domain names, etc., etc. Watch for all of these things. If there's a new login that comes in from this country, you need to create an immediate alert. If a new login comes in from this IP address, if there's communication back and forth between any of these IP addresses, etc., etc., all of these things are enhanced SIM rules that can help you with your monitoring. And then the endpoint detection and response behavioral analytics can also really help you. So this again will help you with the impossible travel stuff or unusual process execution. If somebody's logging in outside of business hours, but they're logging in from the state that they're in, it's like, why are you logging in outside of business hours? That's also a part of behavioral analytics. So all of these things. And then threat hunting queries, right? So going back to the MITRE attack framework, or the cyber kill chain, or anything along those lines, going back to those frameworks and looking at potential threat detection mechanisms or patterns that you can try to advancedly detect to actually hunt down these different threats and any indicators of those threats in advance, and see what queries you can execute and what scripting you can put together to just be on the offensive. Don't be reactive, be proactive, and be on the hunt for these things, because it's already happened once and you're already contained and eradicated. Great. So that means that it can happen again. If it happened once, that means it can happen again. That means you now have an official target on you, because what better target than the one that you were previously able to successfully hack? So you now need to be on the offensive. The MGM Grand should be on the offensive. That's all I'm saying, okay? So the real world example for continuous monitoring, and basically everything else, really, honestly, SolarWinds is another one of those really big names that has to do with, it was a supply chain attack that took place. They had thousands of clients that were using the SolarWinds suite of software. And in those clients were Fortune 500 companies as well as government institutions. So these are not small companies that are using SolarWinds, and now the SolarWinds update was poisoned, and they're in the supply chain of all of those Fortune 500 companies, which means that if any of the, or not if, when those companies updated their SolarWinds software, they were now hacked. And that's because SolarWinds is in their supply chain. The source code for SolarWinds was poisoned. Therefore, any client that does that update is also hacked and infected. So there were many organizations that declared victory after that initial remediation, only to find persistence mechanisms reactivated months later. And that's because they did not do continuous monitoring. So continuous monitoring with the attack-based hunting caught the reentry attempts, essentially. That's what saved them. Had they not done that, then most likely these things would have still been active. You know what I mean? So anytime that something like this takes place, everybody needs to be addressed. Everybody on the team needs to be addressed. And the worst thing for somebody to say is that, oh, I had no idea. That means that you were either not skilled enough or you were unaware. And both of those are grounds for discipline, or at the very least, or I should say grounds for firing, at the very least, disciplinary action, right? So that's basically it. So if you knew, at least, if you were like, you know what, I did notice that this was what's happening, and I chalked it up to this. These were the reasons why I didn't think that it was that big of a deal. At the very least, you were aware. At the very least, you have some reasoning for the action or lack of action. So that at least will be like, okay, well, I'm accountable. I hold myself accountable. I think I should have done this, but I chose to do these other things, and clearly that was a mistake. If you say I wasn't aware, I didn't know, that is a really bad red flag. So all of these things are tying into this overall flow. And for every single one of these steps that we talked about, I guarantee you there's a company that didn't do that step, and then they were caught with their pants down, they were caught off guard, and they were taken advantage of. Their lack of awareness, their lack of skill sets, their lack of prioritization was taken advantage of by the hacker group. And it could be a company as big as SolarWinds that didn't do continuous monitoring. It could be a company as big as MGM Grand who didn't do their proper containment, so on and so forth. There are massive companies that have fallen victim to this, billion-dollar companies that have fallen victim to this. So what makes us think that a small $10 million company is not going to be a victim, right? So all of these things need to be addressed. Okay, so once the incident has been done, the continuous monitoring is going, everything, the dust has settled, so to speak, there needs to be something called the lessons learned meeting, right? And we call this post-incident procedures, but really it's this really big tabletop meeting. Everybody is involved. And at the very least, these specific bullet points are going to be addressed. And there's a really great framework for this. This is the NIST 861R2. Basically, it's a structured gold standard for post-incident activities. And there are templates and all of those things that you can use to review everything that went on in your specific incident and take the notes and run the meeting, etc. And so after the recovery is done and you're in continuous monitoring and you're now doing this big meeting with everybody, you know, the CISOs involved, all the upper management, all the analysts, the incident response team, everybody's involved. Digital forensics is involved, right? Digital forensics would have done the entire investigation to try to find out what the root cause was, like why did this happen? How did it happen? Where did it happen, etc. What have we learned, right? How are we going to update our procedures? How are we going to update our detection rules? How are we going to update our baselines of activity? How are we going to update our playbooks and the guidelines for them? What are the ways that we're going to improve upon this, right? Based on the lessons that we've learned, we need to now actually apply those lessons so that from now on, we are stronger and the same exact thing doesn't happen. It's very unlikely that nothing will happen. I'm sure that they're going to try to attack you again, but at the very least, they can't do the same exact attack from the same root cause and etc. Like there should be updates and upgrades to your overall procedures and detection rules and baselines, all of that stuff, so that at the very least, the same thing doesn't happen again. Then you want to report to the stakeholders, so the executive summary and the technical report. So the executive summary is for the people in the C-suite that don't have a technical background. So the CEO and the CMO, Chief Executive Officer, Chief Marketing Officer, the Chief Financial Officer, all these people who are not in tech in any way should get an executive summary. This is what happened. This is how long it took us to figure it out. And this is how long it took us to respond to it. If there were any damages, these were the damages. From now on, we're going to be doing these kinds of things and we're going to be contracting this extra company, whatever. You don't go into the technical nitty-gritty. The technical report is, okay, what happened was they came in through a phishing attempt using this one user because this user was this, and then so they clicked on this file, and this file opened up these macros in the background, and the processes were run, and then they added this specific script, that the script downloaded all of these external binaries, and then the external binaries were able to launch the command and control server, and then through that they were able to extract data, etc. That's like super technical. So you need to have the non-technical version, and then you have the super technical version, right? The regulatory notifications if required. So this has to do with if it's health information that your company deals with and you need to adhere to HIPAA compliance, then that is a regulatory notification that you probably have to disclose and let everybody know, including all of your patients and all the people who are your clients. You need to let them know because it is a regulatory requirement. And if you don't, you stand to go to court and you stand to have a lawsuit and even more financial damages. And then a review after the action. So what went well, what failed. And again, this would also be done inside of the lessons learned meeting. So all of this, by the way, all of these things, right, should be done inside the lessons learned meeting. The lessons learned meeting is a very important meeting, and it should cover as much detail as humanly possible to make sure that you know exactly what happened, how the responses took place, what did we do right, what did we do wrong, what do we need to do from now on to make sure that this doesn't happen again? Who do we need to update? Who do we need to hire? Who do we need to fire? All of those things should be inside of the lessons learned meeting. So this is a very, very, very important meeting. And without this meeting, you are doomed to repeat the same mistakes over and over and over again. So that is post-incident procedures. Okay, real quick. So let's go through some examples for the actual walkthroughs of incident response. So the first one would be the ransomware containment and eradication example. So there's ransomware that is installed on your system. You need to contain it and you need to eradicate it, basically. So the detection element of this is that the endpoint detection response alert on file encryption activity came up. There's a triage that has to be done immediately when there's an alert like this that comes up because it's very severe. And so then there's a high severity and it needs to be immediate escalation is what the triage says. Triage is very similar to what they do inside of the ER for a hospital. You bring in a bunch of patients, and the ones that are the most emergent, right? This person, if we don't address this, they're going to die. That kind of a thing. The ones that are most emergent needs to be addressed first. So the highest severity needs to be addressed, and it needs to have immediate escalation. This person needs to go into surgery, kind of a thing. Containment would be the next step. We need to isolate the affected VLAN, the virtual LAN, meaning the local area network, the virtual segment of our network. We need to isolate that entire segment. We need to disable any kind of VPN access, and we need to block all the C2 domains from that specific environment. And then all of the VLANs that are connected to this VLAN should also be going under detection, triage, and analysis to see, okay, are any of these virtual networks impacted as well, right? If none of the adjacent ones are impacted, okay, great, now we can focus on this one. We would do an analysis. So the timeline shows initial phishing, which was the thing that started this whole thing. Then there was a PowerShell execution, and then there was lateral movement that took place, and then anything else that took place that led to this file being encrypted. Then we look at the eradication. So the re-image of all of the affected hosts inside of this VLAN. Typically, when you do re-imaging, it just replaces the current image of the disk with the new healthy image. So you would just re-image all of those hosts, delete any kind of persistence mechanisms, for example, schedule tasks or all of those things. Typically, when you do a re-imaging, you're kind of doing factory reset anyways. So all of these things should be deleted, and you would just have to reconfigure them. That would probably be the best, like the safest way to do this. And then patch any kind of an email gateway that you need to, because this whole thing started with phishing. So we need to go ahead and patch our email gateway so that anything that comes from that email address is blocked automatically. Anything that has that file signature is blocked automatically. The hash value of that file, all of those things, or the URL that was clicked inside of that email, all of those things need to be blocked and put inside of our patches for our email gateway. And then we will recover. So restore from clean backups, monitor for 30 days at the very least, and then make sure that post-incident activities are done. So update the phishing training, do the lessons learned, right? So post-incident means lessons learned. Do your lessons learned meeting. In that meeting, they'll say, okay, we're going to update our phishing training. We're going to add an EDR rule for the ransomware strain, an EDR rule for the email address, for the hash value of the file itself, or for the link that was included, the email link, the clickable link inside of the email. My brain just farted again, sorry about that. But whatever you're going to update is going to be included in your lessons learned meeting, and then you're going to notify whoever you need to notify accordingly. Assuming that the encryption has not spread, assuming that the ransomware has not spread to multiple VLANs, then it technically should be considered a low impact kind of an event, and we're fine. None of the critical systems were encrypted. We actually had backups. We didn't have to pay a ransom. All of those things are really, really good signs. So that means that this was, technically a low damage, low impact kind of a process, and you should be happy about that. Basically, you should consider it a win, even though they came in through phishing and we still need to educate people via phishing. But at the very least, we need to consider this a win, because there wasn't a ransom paid, there wasn't a lot of damage done, and we were able to recover this VLAN because it was only that VLAN, and we were able to re-image all of the affected hosts, so that team didn't lose functionality and they were able to get back to work. Our second example has to do with a business email compromise wire transfer attempt. So business email compromise typically is when an executive or when somebody who is in a position of power is impersonated, and it seems like they're sending out requests to do really high impact sensitive kinds of things. For example, initiate a wire transfer. So the detection in this case is that the finance team reports suspicious urgent transfer request. They got a request to transfer a large sum of money to a vendor that they've never sent money to. So it's like, okay, well, we have no idea who this is. We have no idea why we're sending them so much money. We feel like there might be something wrong. So they go ahead and they report it. The containment would be to freeze the wire transfer system and lock the compromised account. It could be the CEO, by the way. Like it could be anybody, because CEOs, again, they're not technically savvy. So they could do something silly and now their business email is compromised, and now somebody's sending out an email from the CEO's email address saying, hey, transfer all this money. And it's coming from the CEO. So it's like, well, that doesn't sound right. So you freeze the wire transfer system and then you lock the CEO's email address. You lock their entire account altogether so that they can't do anything. And then you start analyzing. The timeline shows us impossible travel login. So the CEO lives in Las Vegas, but they logged in from Las Vegas, at 9:15. And then there was a login that happened from, Uzbekistan from 9:30. Right? And it's like, well, how did they even do that? That doesn't even sound right. The CEO has never gone to Uzbekistan, right? So that is immediately showing us that there's something wrong and they were compromised and somebody from a different country is logging in. So we now create a new rule in the email that says, if something like this takes place, if you notice that there was a login, honestly, a login from Las Vegas and then 15 minutes from New York, that's also a big red flag as well. So it doesn't have to be a different country. It's like, well, it takes at least 3 hours, let's say, to fly from this place to this other place, or 5 hours or 6, whatever it is. So it's like, it definitely cannot be possible that they logged in from these two different locations in a span of 15 minutes. We need to update our email rules. If the CEO has never traveled to New York, if we don't have any offices in New York, we don't do business in New York, but we're based out of Las Vegas, all of these things need to be analyzed and updated inside of our rules. Then we are going to eradicate. So in this particular case, we need to reset all of the credentials for the CEO, and we need to remove any kind of malicious inbox rules that may have allowed that email to take place, that may have allowed that entire interaction to take place. Then we're going to recover. So verify that there are no unauthorized transfers that have actually been occurred. If there have been anything initiated, we need to stop it in its tracks. We need to reverse the request, all of that stuff. And in post-incident, we need to implement stricter wire transfer approval processes, meaning that if there's a request, even from the CEO, it needs to go through at least 2 different mechanisms of approval before that wire is even sent to the wire team, or before it's sent to the finance team for them to initiate the wire. So we need to have more barriers for these things to be done. And we need to go ahead and educate our CEO that, hey, listen, Mr. CEO, you did some things that caused some bad turmoil and we could have lost a lot of money. So please don't do that again, sir. I have seen CEOs of companies leave their password to their computer on a Post-it that was attached to their computer monitor. So just because they're the CEO does not mean that they are technically savvy or security savvy. Just keep that in mind. These people are humans. They are susceptible to human flaws and human error. And we just need to account for that. We need to be aware of that. And it's something that we need to keep in mind at all times. And now we are at Chapter 9's incident response questions and practice questions here. So very similar to everything else that we've done with practice questions so far, we're going to go through multiple choice questions. We're going to have scenario questions. And the key recommendations are to make sure that you understand the questions and what the question is actually asking before you start looking for the answer. Look for the most obvious answer. Try to eliminate all the wrong answers and really use critical thinking to your best abilities. I want you to learn how to think. These questions are not going to be identical to what you're going to see in any of the examinations. None of the questions in my courses are, because CompTIA prohibits us from sharing those questions. We sign an NDA when we take the examinations, and we're not allowed to share the questions. So it's very, very important to understand that. So really, more than anything else, what I'm trying to do is teach you how to think and use critical thinking activities to find the answers. So let's go into the first question. In the incident response process, containment should occur after full eradication, immediately after detection and triage, only after executive approval during post-incident review. So again, sequencing. Think about sequencing. You are not going to eradicate without containing. So that's definitely wrong. You're not going to do it post-incident review. That's like when you're doing the lessons learned. So for sure, it's not going to be that. And there may be some cases where, you know, you might need somebody to approve, but an executive who's sitting on the C-suite is not the one that's going to tell you, yeah, go ahead and contain, because those people are usually very hard to reach anyways. So waiting for them to give you approval before you actually contain the threat is also not a good move. So it needs to be immediately after you detect and triage. Which activity focuses on removing all attacker artifacts and persistence mechanisms? So this again, sequencing, right? Containment is done first, and then we're looking at triage, which would be done before containment. So it's triage and then it's containment. And then we're looking at recovery or eradication. And so obviously we need to eradicate first before we go into recover. And this is talking about removing. So that means that we are eradicating. In the 2025 MGM Resorts ransomware incident, what was the primary failure during containment? So slow network segmentation, allowing lateral movement, poor timeline creation, lack of threat intelligence, no EDR deployment. So we don't know whether or not they had EDRs in the first place. I'm assuming that they did. If they did not, that's just embarrassing. That's really, really bad. Lack of threat intelligence could have been the case, but we also don't know that for sure either. It could very much be the case because everything else that they did could result in a lack of threat intelligence, or it could be, or it should be resulting from, should be resulting from a lack of threat intelligence or from a lack of EDR. So these could be the reasons as to why other things took place. But the primary failure during containment specifically is for slow network segmentation. In the previous chapter, we actually reviewed this. So in episode 8, we did review this, and we actually chalked up one of the reasons that had to do with timeline creation as one of the reasons why they failed. So poor timeline creation was also one of the things that they did wrong, but specifically talking about containment, then it would be the segmentation of the network and allowing lateral movement. So that would be the answer. Continuous monitoring after recovery is important to detect reinfection or attacker reentry, only new vulnerabilities, user training, patch compliance. So continuous monitoring is what we're being asked after recovery. So it's important to detect only new vulnerabilities. That is actually not the case because we're trying to detect whether or not the same vulnerabilities are being exploited. So that actually would not be the answer here. We're definitely looking for new vulnerabilities, but after recovery of an incident, we're actually looking for reinfection or the re-entry of the attacker. User training effectiveness is also something that we're monitoring for. That's actually very true because we are training the users to not repeat the same mistake. So we want to make sure that they don't repeat the same mistake that puts us in the same situation again. And patch compliance is not necessarily what we're going through continuous monitoring for. It is important as a post-incident, post-recovery situation, but it's not necessarily what we're looking for. What we're really looking for is either A or C, which is user training effectiveness or reinfection or attacker reentry. I'm going to say reinfection because I think that's the most obvious answer, but user training would also be something that we would be looking for. There you go. All right, when should an incident be escalated to the CISO or executive team? Every single alert. When material impact, regulatory reporting, or reputation risk is likely, only after eradication. Never. Analysts handle everything. Definitely not D. That is definitely not the answer. And it's also not A after every single alert because the CISO is going to be very pissed if with every alert you reach out to them. So only after eradication, that might be the case. However, if the impact is material, meaning to the finances of the company, to the reputation of the company, or anything along those lines, if there's regulatory requirement, compliance requirement, or reputation, all of those things, these things actually should be involving the CISO. Even if you have not eradicated yet, we need to let them know as early as possible that, hey, what's going on can affect us materially, and it can affect our regulation compliance. It can also affect our reputation. We need to get ahead of this right now. We're going to work on the eradication, but you guys need to be aware of what's going on. So B would be my answer, and there it is. The most critical goal of containment is to fully understand the root cause, write the executive report, restore all systems, limit further damage, and preserve evidence. So the most critical goal of containment is to restore all systems, or actually, no, I'm sorry, limit further damage and preserve evidence. That's the critical goal of containment. Restoring all systems would be recovery, not containment. Writing the executive report would be a part of post-incident, and fully understanding the root cause would also be most likely during the post-incident lessons learned. So it's to limit further damage is what containment is doing. Recovery includes returning systems to production from clean backups. That's the answer for sure. Deleting all logs for privacy. Absolutely not. Immediately re-enabling all user accounts. Also no. Disabling all security tools. Absolutely not. So definitely B and D are definitely wrong answers. You're never going to disable all of your security tools as a part of recovery. That's insane. And you're also not going to delete all of your logs because you need that for evidence and you need that for investigation. So that's definitely not the case. So immediately re-enabling all user accounts also seems like a very incorrect answer, because technically, sure, we want our users to be working, but immediately re-enabling them without notifying them what took place, without telling them that, there's new training going on, all of those things need to be done before we immediately re-enable everybody. So recovery includes returning systems to production from clean backups and monitoring for infection. There we go. Which post-incident activity is most likely to result in updated detection rules? So post-incident activity most likely to result in updated detection rules. It would be lessons learned. So triage is not post-incident, containment is not post-incident, and initial detection is not post-incident. The only thing that is actually post-incident is lessons learned. So initial detection would be the very first step. Triage would come after that. Technically, it would be analysis before triage, but whatever. Initial detection would be first. In these options, initial detection would be first. Next would be triage. Next would be containment. And then after everything is done, we would do lessons learned. And in that, it actually falls into post-incident activity. So that would be the answer. In a business email compromise incident, the first containment action is usually to re-image all endpoints, erase the email account, wait for legal review, freeze wire transfer capabilities, lock compromised accounts. The answer is obviously D. You're not going to be waiting for legal review, because in case somebody actually in the wire team, or in case somebody in the financial team actually does something and we lose money, we can't recover that money. Just for your fun fact, wire transfers cannot be reversed. When a wire transfer goes out, it is a hellacious process to get that money returned, and more often than not, it cannot be returned. So once the money is gone in a wire transfer, you can't retrieve it. Therefore, you're not going to wait for legal review, and you're not going to erase the email account because the person needs their email account. And you're not going to re-image all the endpoints because it has nothing to do with that specifically. It has to do with the business email of the CEO or the CFO or something like that. So it would be freezing the wire transfer capabilities and locking whatever the compromised accounts are, so that then you can go ahead and wait for legal review, do everything else that you need to do. But you need to, freezing the wire transfer capabilities is like disconnecting an infected system from the internet. That's basically what it is. So there we go. Continuous monitoring after a supply chain compromise, for example, SolarWinds, is important because attackers often leave dormant persistence. That's true. It replaces the need for eradication. Absolutely not. It automatically patches systems. Absolutely not. It only applies to cloud environments. Also incorrect. Continuous monitoring after supply chain compromise. Okay, you're continually monitoring. So continuous monitoring does not only apply to cloud environments. So again, the word only is one of these trigger words, right? When you see the word only, that by itself is like, it's so rare that that's going to be the answer. So more often than not, that is not the answer. And in this case, that's also true. It automatically patches systems. Continuous monitoring does not patch systems. It monitors. You're not patching. You're not doing anything. You're just watching. So that's not the answer. And it does not replace the need for eradication. That is also untrue. Continuous monitoring is doing a completely different thing. There is no such a thing that replacing eradicate or replacing anything in a step of in a series of steps is also one of those things where it's like, no, that doesn't replace anything. It's kind of like one of those red flag words like the word only. We're definitely not doing that either. So attackers often leave dormant persistence. Dormant meaning it's kind of sleeping, and then in a week or 2 weeks or in a month, it wakes back up, and now it's going to persist, and they're going to try to do something else and try to reconnect to their C2 server. So this is why we continuously watch. We're watching for that dormant persistence. Scenario: your endpoint detection response system alerts on multiple hosts showing file encryption activity, ransomware is suspected. List the first 3 containment steps you would take and explain why eradication must come after containment. So there's no answer to this. Yeah. So there's no answer to this. So this is one of those debate questions that I would welcome you to leave a comment in the comment section below. And I just want to hear how you would approach this. And then please feel free to comment on each other's comments, and I'll chime in those conversations. And, I would say, I should have said this in the previous practice questions, but, pause before I give my answer so that it doesn't affect your answer. So pause, give the answer, and then based on that, go ahead and drop your, play the video again and just see what my answer would be and if it lines up with your answer. You may have a better answer than me, honestly. Okay, so the first 3 containment steps that I would take for this kind of a situation would be, number 1, to isolate the host and the network segment to make sure that the ransomware has not spread. Then I would look at the adjacent network segments to see if any of those have been infected, and then continue moving in that direction until I can really finally hone in on which network segments are actually infected. And then from there, I will come back and I will go ahead and lock out all of the users that would have been potentially infected. So we isolate the network segment and then we lock out all of the users. And then we start scanning for the types of files that are being encrypted, and then we would move towards deleting everything. So before eradication, right? So eradication can only be done once you know how wide the virus has spread, how wide the malware has spread. So you can't eradicate before you know how wide it spread. And then you move into eradication. When you finally know what's going on, when you finally blocked off everything and you logged out all the users and you know exactly what you're dealing with, then you go ahead and get into eradication. So it's very important to do all of the containment, lock out the device, lock out the network segment, look at other network segments that would be connected to that subnet, and then from there, start moving towards the containment of the actual virus itself, and then deleting and eradicating the malware. Next scenario would be that a finance employee reports a suspicious urgent wire transfer request from the CEO. What immediate containment action do you take? Outline the escalation path. So the immediate action would be to freeze all wire transfer requests and to lock out the CEO's email account. And then we go ahead and escalate immediately. We contact the CEO. We try to get them on the phone, or we try to go into their office and we say, hey, did you do this? Okay, if you have not done this, then we need to go ahead and inform the wire team. We need to go ahead and inform the legal team, the security team. We need to inform the CFO. We need to figure out exactly how this happened, right? What did you click on? What did you do? And then from there, train the CEO, implement the blacklist of whatever the email was that contacted the CEO, or whatever the domain that they clicked on or the file that they opened. Make sure that we configure all of our security tools and our email gateways to block those things. And I think that's a pretty solid approach. I would love to hear your approach to this as well. And that's it. So those were the only 2 scenario questions that we had. So that was it for the practice questions of section 9, chapter 9. If you would like to get those practice questions, that entire slideshow, as well as the book that I'm using for the lecture, as well as the containment checklist, the recovery playbook, escalation matrix, all of these things, then you can join Hackaholics Anonymous. There will be a full official message for that in just a couple of minutes. But if you're a member of Hackaholics Anonymous as an agent level member or above, then you can go ahead and visit the members area and you'll be able to find all of these downloads there already, as well as the entire file for the practice questions, as well as the entire file for the book. And yeah, that's pretty much it. And there's also multiple scripts that I developed for CySA, Python scripts. There's also a bunch of other Python scripts that have been developed for our various members. There's also the course downloads for the other CompTIA courses, and just a bunch of perks and a bunch of benefits that are inside of that members area. So highly encourage you to check it out if you have not done so already. And with that, we're officially ready to go into chapter 10, which I believe is actually the last chapter for domain 3, and then we're going to go into domain 4. So that's pretty much it. So I think we're making some pretty good progress. Shout out to you if you've been watching these videos and going through this content all in. I don't think you'll be able to do it in a day because there's a lot of different hours of content. But if you do it in a day, big shout out to you. But if you're doing it in a week and if you're doing it consistently, then big shout out to you as well. If you found value in this video, or if you would like to get more videos like this one, especially in the CompTIA CySA series, make sure that you like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so that you get notified when those videos come out. You will also get notified when other videos from other playlists like CompTIA Pentest Plus, Offensive Pentesting, SOC Level 1 2026, or AI for Cybersecurity, and really anything else that gets dropped. So if you want to get those notifications, I would encourage you to subscribe and turn on that notification bell. Make sure you drop a comment in the comment section. Let me know how you thought, what you thought about our course today or our episode today. I would love to hear what your responses to those scenario-based questions are so that we can kind of get a nice little back and forth going in the comment section, and I'll chime in when appropriate. And other than that, that's pretty much it. So make sure that you like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell. And of course, if you have not done so already, and if you would like to see what is available to you as a member, make sure you check out Hackaholics Anonymous. To get access to the CySA Plus book, the practice questions, the exclusive episode downloads, and to get access to the CompTIA Linux Plus, Network Plus, Pentest Plus, and Security Plus course contents, and to get access to me via Discord plus all the future perks and content rollouts, consider joining Hackaholics Anonymous. We have 4 tiers: the Supporter, Agent, Guardian, and Master. Each tier gets their own Discord server and early access to content. The Agent, Guardian, and Master levels get exclusive content, exclusive downloads, monthly Python automations, live streams with me every month, plus so much more. And to join, you can simply click the link in the description below. It's the link that says Join Hackaholics Anonymous. I look forward to seeing you in the Discord chats. If not, I look forward to seeing you in the comment section. Until then, happy hacking and stay out of trouble. It's your boy Hank Hackerson at Hank Hacks Hackers, your favorite network and system attacker / protector. If no one else loves you, Hank loves you. Love, peace, and chicken grease. And I will see you in our next episode later. In episode 10 of the CompTIA CySA Plus training series, we're going to go through the IR lifecycle and management, so the incident response lifecycle and management. My name is Hank Hackerson, your trainer for today, and to get more videos like this one, make sure that you like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell. In episode 8, we looked at the frameworks that exist in the IR cycle, and then in episode 9, we looked at the core activities of incident response. So for example, containment, eradication, recovery, escalation, and monitoring. And in episode 8, we really talked about more the detection, analysis, triage elements of it. And so now in chapter 10, episode 10, we're going to pull everything together into the actual life cycle, the incident response life cycle, the big picture view that separates good incident response programs from the great ones, and you're going to get a few different examples. Obviously, we're going to do as many different case studies as we can throughout the whole thing. And of course, at the end of it, we're going to do some practice questions as well. This will end up being the last chapter in Domain 3. And then after this, we're going to dive into Domain 4. And next thing you know, we're going to be done with the entire CompTIA CySA Plus CS0-004 training series. In this episode, in this chapter, we're going to be covering the overarching management of incidents. So through post-incident improvement with strong emphasis of mature response plans and playbooks, integration with business continuity and disaster recovery, which is very, very important. Digital forensics and root cause analysis, including hands-on tools like autopsy, ongoing exercises, training, and program maturity best practices. In the 04 version of CySA Plus, you need to understand how individual incidents fit into a mature, continuously improving IR program, and this is what the real world will expect of you. So we're going to wrap this episode. At the very end, I'll just show you where autopsy is, and I mean, you probably can guess that you can download it for free on any of your machines, but there are a couple of free rooms that exist on TryHackMe, so I guess I'll tell you now. There are a couple of free rooms that exist on TryHackMe on autopsy, so you can actually use the virtual machines as well as the autopsy tool along with a bunch of files that you can analyze for digital forensics. And it's very, very cool, very handy, nice skill set to develop in case you actually want to go into digital forensics. Digital forensics, it falls into the same breath of the incident response cycle. It's just that after the incident is over, you're going to be doing forensics and investigation. So it's less pressure, I want to say, because incident response is actually while the event is taking place, while the incident is happening. So that requires a lot of maintenance of your cool under pressure, whereas digital forensics is the event is over and now we're doing an investigation to figure out exactly what happened and how we can prevent it from happening again. So tools like autopsy are excellent in this kind of regard because they can do a deep analysis of a disk image, for example, like the image of a computer, and look at all of the artifacts that exist and help you do deep dives into a variety of different elements of that disk image so you can try to find the artifacts that would relate to your investigation to help you find out all the answers, all of the open questions that still need to be answered for that incident. So cool little tool, and again, it does exist on TryHackMe that you can mess with, and of course you can also download it for free on your own computer and use it that way. To get access to the CySA Plus book, the practice questions, the exclusive episode downloads, and to get access to the CompTIA Linux Plus, Network Plus, PenTest Plus, and Security Plus course contents, and to get access to me via Discord plus all the future perks and content rollouts, consider joining Hackaholics Anonymous. We have 4 tiers: the Supporter, Agent, Guardian, and Master. Each tier gets their own Discord server and early access to content. The Agent, Guardian, and Master levels get exclusive content, exclusive downloads, monthly Python automations, live streams with me every month, plus so much more. And to join, you can simply click the link in the description below. It's the link that says Join Hackaholics Anonymous. I look forward to seeing you in the Discord chats. If not, I look forward to seeing you in the comment section. Until then, happy hacking and stay out of trouble. So as a quick recap of what we talked about in episode 9, the core activities, we talked about containment, eradication, recovery, escalation, and continuous monitoring. And it actually needs to happen in this order exactly, because if you jump into recovery without doing proper containment, then you really are just leaving yourself open to be hacked again or for the virus to continue to spread. So this does need to happen sequentially. This is very, very important. We also talked about it in the last episode in depth, but you know, it's logic, right? It's common sense. If you really think about it, if you found a subnet in your network that has malware or ransomware installed, before you go into eradicating it or before you go into recovery measures, you want to make sure that that ransomware, that malware does not spread to the rest of your network. So you want to stop the spread. and preserve evidence as best as you can for the digital forensics people to do their investigations. And then for eradication, again, remove all of the malicious artifacts, but try to preserve evidence. Recovery, same thing. Return to normal operations safely. Try to preserve evidence. Escalation, know when and how to bring in higher levels. So I would say this is probably the one step in this whole process where you need to, if you can't contain it, if you don't know what to do, and you think it's going to be beyond your control, you need to escalate to somebody who knows how to do it. Eradication, same thing. If you can't eradicate it and you need help, escalate before, instead of trying to figure it out on your own and wasting time and leaving room for more damage to be done, escalate. Same thing for recovery. Recovery isn't that urgent. Containment and eradication are super urgent. Recovery isn't that urgent, and usually you can be a little bit less amplified, not amplified, adrenaline rush, right? You know what I mean? Like you don't have to be on super high adrenaline when you're doing recovery, because for the most part, eradication has been done. Hopefully eradication has been done and containment has been done properly. So as long as these two have been done, you can kind of be a little bit calmer during recovery. And then escalation, you can also use escalation during recovery. And then continuous monitoring is really what you do to make sure that this whole thing doesn't happen again, especially what you just went through. You want to make sure that it doesn't reinfect or reoccur in the upcoming weeks and months. And then from there, you can make sure that you configure all of your tools and your processes and your playbooks and everything to prevent it from ever happening again. At the very least, don't give the hackers the opportunity to do the same tactics to hack you. Just let them kind of hack you with new tactics. You know what I mean? So that's pretty much the key thing that we're trying to address, and all of the topics that we talked about in episode 9. So these are tactical steps that sit inside the broader lifecycle, and a mature program ensures that these are repeatable, documented, practiced, and improve over time. Again, you do not want the same thing to happen every single time. At the very least, you want to keep these hackers on their toes so that they have to try new tactics, techniques, and procedures to still target you and still attack you. Okay, so let's get into the full incident response lifecycle. There are going to be 4 subsections underneath this title, and each one of them will stand alone, and it'll be its own set of instructions, and it'll have its own set of examples and plans and things like that. So the first thing that we want to address are the response plans and playbooks. And so this is literally as it is titled. There is a playbook, there's some kind of a best practice document or, folder or something. There's something that exists that says, hey, if this happens, do this. Or, do these things. If this happens, do these things, etc. So this is known as the incident response plan. And in the incident response plan, you have the high-level view of it. And then inside of that plan, you have individual playbooks. And the individual playbooks are the step-by-steps of doing something. So, incident response plan says, there's defining roles that these people will do these things. Each one of these groups are responsible for these things. This is how we should be communicating with each other and what we should be communicating to each other. This is who you should be communicating with. And then legal considerations to keep in mind as you're going about the activities themselves. And then the escalation paths for whatever the specific incident may be. And then these also will be outlined in the greatest detail in the playbook itself. So it'll be step by step, scenario specific. So in case of ransomware, do this. In case of business email compromise, do this. Data breach, do this. Supply chain, do this. And then inside of each one of these, right, there will be, okay, these are the roles that are assigned and these are the responsibilities. This is how you communicate. This is what you communicate. This is who you communicate with. These are the legal considerations, and these are the escalation paths for ransomware. And then same thing for business email compromise and so on. So the response plans and the playbooks are your best friend, and any large company will have these, mainly because number one, you need to address everything that a person may not think about. So most people won't be considering legal considerations unless you're really seasoned, right? Unless like you really have been around and you've gone through a few different types of hacks and attacks and things like that. You really don't consider legal considerations. So you need to address that. And then the second reason is Some people get flustered. Some people get nervous, and the pressure can distract them, and they may worry, through their pressure and through the worry and through all of that stuff, they may miss a step. And so it's very important for that specific reason. You have to account for the fact that human beings are emotional. I'm one of the more emotional people because of my personality and I guess my zodiac sign. I don't know if that's really even a thing or whatever, but I'm emotional. I'm like one of the more emotional people, and it's a strong suit. It can be like a benefit about my personality, but also in certain environments, my emotions can get the best of me and they can make me lose logical ability. So that's one of the things that we have to account for. Human beings at large, we are all emotional creatures unless you're some kind of a psychopath. But for the most part, we're all emotional creatures, which means that we need to account for that. We need to plan for our emotions kind of getting out of hand. And in case that happens, there needs to be a step-by-step guide. And that's why these things are so important in incident response, because they're more likely a pressure can mess with somebody. So the key elements of a strong playbook, especially in the 0.4 version of CySA Plus, is that there needs to be a clear decision tree. So this is what you do, and this is what you do if this happens, and if this is what you do if this happens. Has this happened? Yes or no? If yes, do this. If no, do this. That's a decision tree. Contact lists, internal, external incident response firms, regulators, law enforcement, all of these things if necessary. More often than not, the rookie person is not going to be in charge of contacting these types of people. Management is going to be in charge of contacting these types of people, but in case the manager is not available for whatever reason, and you have to do it based on the rules in the playbook. If the playbook says that based on these types of rules, based on if this threshold on severity is hit, we have to contact regulators or external incident response firms. And if the management is nowhere to be found and you can't reach them and the threshold has been hit, you need to do that. You need to contact these people. Evidence handling procedures. Chain of custody falls under evidence handling procedures. Preserving the evidence falls under these procedures. So this is also very, very important. You don't want the evidence to be lost, and you also don't want the evidence to be altered or tampered with to the point that you can't kind of do your investigation appropriately. All of that is very, very important. Communication templates, so internal status templates, regulatory notification templates, how to contact law enforcement. All of these things are going to be inside of a playbook, and these are just key elements that are kind of brought into focus for CS0-004, but everything else in play is in play too. So the more information, the better it is. That's kind of the key thing here. You don't want any room for interpretation. You don't want any room for somebody to have to come up with their own processes as they're going through something like this. Everything should be laid out clearly in minute detail, in painful detail, so that they know exactly what needs to be done. It's better to have more detail than less detail. As a quick little example for these, in 2025, there was a Change Healthcare ransomware attack. And this happened specifically in 2024, but I guess the current update was around 2025, maybe when I created these documents. I'm not exactly sure what the 2025 reference is, but the actual attack itself took place in 2024. And there were a lot of healthcare organizations that were held at ransom. And so they had to update their ransomware playbooks to include the explicit steps for notifying HSS and then the 72-hour rule and coordinating with CySA. And so the ones who actually had mature playbooks restored their operations weeks faster. You have to understand how important that is when you are a healthcare organization. Weeks of delay in healthcare literally means lives lost. So it's a very, very profound concept when you really think about how important it is to be up to date with all of your playbooks, and to also just have explicit instructions, explicit steps for, if this happens, do this, if that happens, do that, and what it means in the mean time to recovery. So when you say that they restored their operations weeks faster, that means their mean time, their average time to recover all of their procedures and their systems and the business in general was weeks ahead of their competition. So it's very, very, very important to have all of these things in place. And, in the last 2 episodes, we used the MGM grant example, and I think we might even use that in this episode as well. But the MGM grant example is a classic case as to an organization who did not have the proper incident response plans in place. They didn't have the proper playbooks in place, and so they suffered losses as a result of it. Okay, moving on to business continuity and disaster recovery. So these are another set of steps and procedures that we have to put in place. And so in incident response, we have to integrate with the business continuity and disaster recovery programs. Business continuity ensures that critical business functions continue during and after the incident. So this is a very, very key concept. And so, things like redundant servers falls under business continuity. So if one of our servers is a victim to a denial of service attack and that server crashes, there needs to be a backup server that will pick up the services and pick up the functions almost immediately, right? If one server crashes, the next one needs to come up. This is why cloud infrastructure is actually so useful, mainly because you can just say, okay, in case this main server crashes, just immediately defaults to this other server. And it does so automatically in a span of maybe minutes or maybe even seconds. You know what I mean? So if one of them crashes, as soon as it's detected that that thing has crashed, it moves on to the next one and the next one and so on and so forth. So if you choose, especially in different geolocations, so you say, for our main server, we're going to use Georgia. And then for our backup server, we're going to use Utah. And then for our third backup server, we're going to use California, something like that. When you do that, that means that now you have 3 backups in 3 completely separate locations. So if somebody attacked one specific location, or if not even that, like let's say there was a disaster and the Georgia server warehouse had, I don't know, an earthquake or something, and their power was lost or something like that, that's a disaster. And so if that happens, then the Georgia location is affected. If you had a secondary backup server also in the Georgia location, now your backup server is also affected. So it's always good to have, in cloud environments especially, it's always good to have backup servers in different geolocations to just make sure if one of them is being, falling victim to an actual natural disaster, it doesn't affect the other ones. And then disaster recovery focuses on restoring IT systems post-disaster or maybe even during the disaster. So business continuity is to get the business functions going, and then disaster recovery is to restore post-disaster or maybe even during a disaster if you're using a cloud environment in that example. The key integration points for this are to have clean backup validation. So test your restores regularly, meaning the process for restoration, test them regularly to just make sure that they're actually functioning properly and the data itself is really nice and current, and the backups are really current or recent at least, so that you actually have really good information to back up to in case something happens and you're being held at ransom and you have to wipe your systems or something like that. Alternate processing sites, cloud failover. So I just mentioned this, so I'm not going to go too deep into this, but just having alternate processing sites, different geolocations in case something happens, so that the same impact for one location will not impact another location. And we have some key metrics. So the recovery time objective and the recovery point objective are very, very important. So the recovery time objective obviously means, okay, so we want to keep our recovery time less than 5 minutes. Let's say that's what it is, right? As long as we stay under 5 minutes, we have met our objective. If we go over 5 minutes, that means we did not meet our recovery time objective. And then the recovery point objective is, we want to recover to 2 days. Like we want our recovery point to be 2 days prior to today. Let's say that's what it is. It's like if our recovery point is a week prior to today, then we've lost a lot of data. We've lost a lot of functionality. We've lost customer information, whatever it is. So usually the recovery point objective should be daily. We want to be able to restore to yesterday or the day before or whatever it is. If in the case of the MGM Grand thing where the hackers were inside of their systems for days, then you are backing up to a point where it was days ago, maybe it was weeks ago, and that is a recovery point that can be damaging. It can just productivity can be lost. You know what I mean? There could have been so much progress that have been made during those days and weeks that now you have to lose, mainly because you don't want to reset your system to a point where the hack was still live and the ransomware was still in your systems. So you want the recovery point to be at a point, the most recent point, that there was no ransomware or malware inside of your systems. And if you're not getting regular backups, then that will end up being days or weeks ago, and that can potentially cost you time, efficiency, productivity, money, all of that stuff. And then you're going to run tabletop exercises that include both incident response and the BCDR teams. And this is all to make sure that everybody knows exactly what they're supposed to be doing when these kinds of things happen. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. If something happens, when something happens, who's going to do what? Okay, let's run the exercise. Boom. Hack took place. It took 10 minutes for us to detect it. Now what's going to happen? Who's going to do what? Okay, what's the next step? What's the next step? It's a simulation. It's rehearsals. This is what this is. It's a rehearsal to make sure that you are fully prepared and you know exactly what you're supposed to be doing when something like that happens. So to bring this kind of home for you, to bring it down to the ground as a case study, there was a CrowdStrike attack in 2025. And it caused a global outage for CrowdStrike. And CrowdStrike is another one of those really big names in security. It was not a malicious outage, but it was treated as an incident response event by many people because it was an outage. So whether or not it's malicious, it doesn't really matter because there's still an outage of service. So the organizations that actually had really good business continuity and disaster recovery integrated with their incident response plans, they switched to their backup identity providers and failover cloud environments in a span of hours, which is really good. When you're talking about recovery time objective, that's really good. So those without those things failed and they faced multi-day outages. So comparing a couple of hours to get back to business as usual versus a couple of days, you can imagine that that recovery time objective is significantly different, and business has been lost during those days and productivity has been lost. Clients are now really upset and you're losing reputation points. And if it's longer than 4 days, now you have to report to the SEC, and so many other things can be involved because you just didn't have the proper integrations between your business continuity, disaster recovery, and integrations with the incident response lifecycle. Now switching gears to forensics and the root cause analysis. So this is technically the step after incident response. This is where the investigation is very heavily focused. And so digital forensics, and I mean the term forensics is actually a term that's used in investigations inside of crime scenes and all of these things. So this is no different. We're just doing digital forensics because we're doing our investigations against a computer image or inside of a network, something like that, inside of logs, all of those things. So digital forensics is the preservation, collection, examination, and analysis of digital evidence in a forensically sound manner. And this is also a very big topic. There's a lot of details that goes into this. There's a series of videos for digital forensics and incident response on this channel, so you can always go look into that. There's way more involved in digital forensics than what CYSA requires you to know. It's just you gotta keep in mind that the processes have to actually be in place. You have to know about these processes and you have to account for these processes and keep certain things in mind. For example, the chain of custody, and we'll talk about that. So the inside of digital forensics is the root cause analysis. So determining why the incident occurred, technical process and human factors behind the reasonings of why this occurred. What is the root cause? Where did it stem from? What was the initial series of steps? What was the very first step that the hackers took? How did they enter? What did they use to enter? What system did they use to enter? So on and so forth. So it's the root cause. And then this whole thing falls inside of digital forensics. Now, when it comes down to the concept of forensics, there are a few things that are very, very important. Number one is the chain of custody. So the chain of custody says that I gathered the evidence, right? I collected and gathered the evidence, and I transferred it to the hard drive, and then that hard drive was then transferred to the evidence locker, right? And then the next person that picked up the hard drive was my colleague Jane Smith, something like that. And then when Jane Smith picked it up, she has to also document, okay, I picked up this hard drive at such and such time. And then before she works on the hard drive, she looks at the hash value of the hard drive, and then she compares it to the hash value that I generated when I collected the image of that hard drive to make sure that between her taking it and me putting it into the evidence locker, nothing was tampered on that hard drive. So we're both analyzing the same exact disk image. Now, if she does something that changes the image, therefore changing the hash value of the hard drive, she needs to document exactly what she did. And then inside of the chain of custody form, she needs to put the new hash value of the new drive. And then if, somebody who's looking at that entire chain of custody form, they look at the form and they're like, oh, the hash value changed between the evidence locker and Jane putting it back into the evidence locker, there needs to be a clear outline of why did this change? What did Jane do? It shouldn't be something that Jane is not aware of, right? Jane should be fully aware of what she did, and she should say, yeah, I expected the hash value to change because I did these things right here, right? So that's very, very important. The chain of custody is very important. Now, write blockers are also really important. These are essentially physical devices as you're taking a copy of the computer that's on the crime scene, for example. So let's say there's a computer on the crime scene. It's not a laptop, or let's say the laptop battery is at risk of dying. And so if that happens, then you are going to lose all of the evidence that's inside of the RAM memory. The RAM memory is volatile memory, and it wipes whenever the device is restarted. So the stuff that is inside of the RAM memory is at risk of being lost, or it could be a desktop that, we can't transfer the desktop without unplugging it from the outlet, right? And so we need to take an image of this thing. Now, in order for us to take an image of this thing, we need to take an exact image without writing anything on top of the image, right? We don't want to make any alterations to the disk image. So we need a write blocker for that. And a write blocker is typically a physical device. Think about an adapter that you plug your hard drive to. Your external hard drive is plugged into the adapter, and then the adapter is then plugged into the computer. So I'm going to show you what this actually looks like. So let's see if we can find an image of a write blocker just for reference for you. I keep wanting to zoom out and my keyboard is dead. So let's see, write blockers, digital forensics. Let's look for that. And then let's look at, there we go. So these are the write blockers that exist. So these are devices that essentially you would plug into. So let's go back to the results and see if we can find like images for them. Okay, there you go. This is a really good image right here where you can see that this person is taking an image of the computer disk that you see right here. And they're taking that image from this disk. It's plugged into the write blocker, and the write blocker is downloading that image into what looks like, I think that's Autopsy or something that's running on their device. And so they're doing this because they don't want to alter any of the data that is on this hard drive that you see right here. So this is a very key concept in digital forensics and of course the investigations. And then so we can also look at this while we're here, digital forensics chain of custody form. Let's see if I can find anything along those lines. And I mean, it's just a form, so it's not really like that crazy. This one looks kind of good. So it doesn't have the location for the hash value on this, but you can see that, it was received from such and such, received by such and such on this date at this time, right? And then passed on to, and then so, I handle it. I put it in the evidence locker. The evidence locker says that they received it from Hank. They received it from Hank. The employee who received it is here, and the next person who picks it up, they'll say, I received it from the evidence locker, and it was me who received, etc. So this is like a very, very key kind of basic form and chain of custody. We want the one that actually has the information about hash values and things like that, and I think it's this one actually. So yeah, there you go, you can see it. So single evidence, and you see MD5 sum right here, SHA-1 sum right here. So this is a key element in dealing with digital forensics, the hash value, because hash values change even with the slightest modification or alteration to the disk image or to any files. Literally, a single file inside of the disk image can be changed, and the entire hash value of that disk will change. So all of these things are key concepts. And of course, when you're dealing with chain of custody forms, you want to document the hash values every single time. And the hash values need to match every single time. Whoever is handling it, doesn't matter. It needs to match every single time. So I put it into the evidence locker. It has a certain hash value, right? And then Jane goes and picks it up from the evidence locker, and then it has a new hash value. It has a changed hash value. And Jane is like, okay, well, what happened while this thing was sitting inside of the evidence locker? Something has happened. Did somebody break into the evidence locker? Did the employee that was working at the evidence locker, did they do something to the disk image? What happened that between the time that it was dropped off and I picked it up, the hash value is now different? So that could be a thing, right? Like a spy broke into the evidence locker and wiped the disk image, and now the disk image is different. Something like that, you know what I mean? That could very well be, I don't know, it could happen. It doesn't just happen in the movies. Like there's a reason why it's in the movies. But that could very much be a thing. So the hash values need to line up when we're doing digital forensics. That's like a very, very important concept. Now, for digital forensics, we actually have a variety of different tools that are available. Autopsy is a main one that has actually been referenced in the CySA0-004 examination. This is an open source graphical user interface tool that allows you to have a front and end connection for the sleuth kit, which is basically the kit of, it's like a suite of tools, we should say, that is available for digital forensics. And so Autopsy is an open source GUI or GUI, however you want to pronounce it, front end for the sleuth kit. And so it allows for timeline analysis, keyword search across all of the images, file carving, registry analysis, web artifact extraction, all of these things. If you're interested in learning about them, I have done a video on Autopsy. There are multiple rooms on TryHackMe that you can use, that you can kind of go through to learn more about Autopsy. This is a really good tool for digital forensics, especially if you're interested in doing digital forensics, because it is kind of a fun gig because you're doing investigations and things like that. So it is really cool, and it's a very important tool for you to learn. There are other tools as well, so volatility, and I do have this also inside of the channel. So we have a video on volatility, which does memory forensics, the RAM, random access memory, the volatile memory. The FTK Forensic Toolkit Imager, and then of course X-Ways Forensics, which is a commercial tool that actually requires a paid license. So these are other common tools. Autopsy is one of the ones that is mentioned specifically inside of CS0-004, and it is one of the better ones because of the fact that it is an open source tool. So it is something that you should definitely become familiar with, and I would recommend watching the dedicated videos for Autopsy and even going through the room on TryHackMe that shows you how to use Autopsy. The real world forensic example, and I knew that we were going to talk about this again. So the 2025 attack against MGM Resorts, this is one of those really famous cases, mainly because it happened against such a large entity. The MGM Resorts is like multiple hotels, and you would expect them to have better security posture. And another reason is that it happened recently. It happened 2025. I'm recording this January 2026. So in this particular case, the forensic analysis of memory dumps revealed that the exact PowerShell commands that were used for lateral movement led to an updated EDR rule that prevented reattack attempts. This is why forensics is so important. And you should be doing this. Like, no matter what happens, you should be doing forensics against every kind of digital attack that has taken place, just so you can see what the PowerShell attempts were, or the PowerShell commands were, and if they didn't use PowerShell, what was the executable that they downloaded, what was the IP address that contacted or tried to attempt to connect to us, and where was the data being sent, if the data was being exfiltrated. All of the details that come from the investigation are massively useful to prevent these things from taking place again. And thankfully, this was actually something that was done well on the MGM Resorts ransomware, or after the MGM Resorts ransomware attack, and they were able to update their EDR rules that prevented reattack attempts. And finally, we get to talk about training, exercises, management best practices, and all of that other good stuff, the ancillary elements to having a really strong incident response digital forensics program. So mature incident response programs run these types of things. They have this kind of training, etc. So when we're talking about these things, it's just the goal, right? This is the best case scenario. This is what a company should aspire to and want to achieve for their own security posture and their own infrastructure for incident response and disaster recovery and business continuity, all that stuff, right? So a mature program, when we refer to a mature program, we're talking about a program that has been around for a while. It's being led by seasoned people and they know what they're doing. They have all of the foundational elements in place. For example, they have tabletop exercises that they run regularly, right? They run it every quarter. And they have discussion-based scenarios, a tabletop, everybody gathers around. Think about a table read enacting before anybody starts shooting or everything, and you just want to see how people are going to read the lines and all those things. You gather everybody in the same room, the director and all the actors, they all sit down around a table and they start reading through everything. This is very much the same way. It's a rehearsal, right? So tabletop exercise is a rehearsal. And the more you rehearse, people will not be caught off guard. They will know what to expect. So tabletop exercises running once a quarter is ideal. It's the best thing, best case scenario. Discussion-based scenarios. If it's an environment where you're getting hacked regularly and it's happening all the time, or at the very least you're getting attacked regularly. Let's say they're not successful attacks, but you're being attacked regularly, then maybe you need to do it once a month or something like that. But at the very least, once a quarter, I think is great. Once every 6 months is kind of pushing it. Once every year is way too long. Too much can happen inside of a year. Functional exercises, so simulated incidents with partial system interaction is another great way of doing this, where you don't notify the defensive team, right? You don't notify the incident response team, and then you tell somebody in your pen testing team, or you hire a pen testing company and you say, okay, I want you to attack us. I want to see how these people respond. We did a tabletop exercise last month, and I want to see how much of that information they actually retained. So we want to see how they respond. So we want to simulate an attack against that team and see what their response times are, what their procedures are, if they're going to use all their resources, etc. And then you have a full scale simulation, which is live fire with Atomic Red Team or Caldera, which is what we talked about in episode 7, chapter 7. And there are also other videos that exist on this channel, as well as rooms that are on TryHackMe that will take you through Atomic Red Team and the use of Caldera in both of them and how they map to MITRE attack framework and things like that. So functional exercises could be partial, full-scale exercises could be a full-on attack against the team and kind of no holds barred, and let's see what they do. Let's see how they respond, right? So all of these things are key elements. These are signs that you have a mature incident response program, which is a great thing to have. And then we have the training element of it. So this is all considered training, by the way, just so you can rest assured on this. It's just there's separate training modules that can also exist. For example, an annual incident response team training, phishing simulations, executive tabletop, C-level awareness that the executive team should also go through. The company that I work with rolls out actual video trainings once a year, and you're required by a certain time to have finished a certain number of them. So let's say, within your first quarter, you should have finished, and I mean, there was over 100 that was rolled out at the beginning of 2026. So, let's say you finish, I don't know, like 25 every quarter or something like that. Or I think it's definitely over 100, so maybe like 30 per quarter, something like that. And they give you these deadlines, and if you don't meet them, you're definitely somebody's gonna have a talking with you. So you should be completing all of your trainings because they need to transfer information to you, and you have to ingest the information. And some things are really important, so you have an actual annual training. Other things are like, okay, well, we're gonna transfer the information via video and things like that, so you need to go ahead and watch these videos, right? And then we have the management best practices. So regular playbook reviews. So anytime that you do a tabletop exercise, you should be reviewing your playbook after every major incident or after every full-scale simulation or every functional exercise. You should be reviewing the playbook to see if certain steps exist, and if they don't, especially if you hire a third-party company to do the attack against your defensive team, and that company is super clever and they're very good at what they do, so they use a lot of tactics and techniques that you don't have inside of your playbook. So now you need to make sure that you include all of their tactics and techniques in your playbook as well. Make sure that your metrics are being monitored and updated regularly. So the mean time to detect, meaning the average time that it takes for you to detect something is wrong. For example, this in particular for the MGM Grand attack, this was days. Their average time to detect that incident, that ransomware attack, it took them days before they realized what was going on. And by the time that they realized, the encryption had already taken place. And that's like a really bad time to notice that something's wrong, because now you're really playing reaction mode and you're putting out fires instead of being proactive and detecting things in advance. So the hackers were inside of their systems moving laterally for days, and that is way too long. It is so scary how long that is, because there's so much damage. I mean, the damage was very massive. So it's like, that's a really classic story for you to know this is what you should avoid doing. So mean time to detect feeds directly into the mean time to respond, or I should say recover. That's probably what this is, or mean time react, mean time to respond. I want to say it's the mean time to recovery is what we're referencing here, but it's definitely mean time to respond and the mean time to recovery. Both of them can be covered by this acronym. And so as you can imagine, the mean time to detect feeds into the mean time to respond and then the mean time to recovery. And the total combination of all of those times, right? So the mean time to detect and respond will feed, and finally that final number will end up be the mean time that it took for us to recover. And that for the MGM folks, it was days, or I think weeks probably, because they were out for a long time. Their systems were down for a long time. The containment time is another key metric that you need to think about. So how long did it take for us to be able to contain the malware from spreading? And then the false positive rate is another key metric that we need to also address. In many environments, the false positive rate is above 70%, which is a lot of noise. If you can imagine that there are a lot of alerts coming up, but they're all false positives and they're distracting and they take up time and energy for you to verify whether or not they're actually a false positive. And then it distracts from all of the true positives that you need to address, right? Because the dashboard that you're dealing with has thousands of items that are all false positives. So configuration specifically is what fixes the false positive rate. Your SIM tools and your EDR tools being properly configured so that you're not getting too many false positives. And then of course, this is all about fine-tuning and improving your training, improving your systems, and everything else that falls in between, so that you can detect something quickly, you can respond and recover quickly, you can contain the malware from spreading quickly. All of those things fall under key metrics. Then there's the integration with threat intelligence, which we talked about in episode 4, chapter 4, which is a very key piece of this as well. You need to be up to date. You need to be current on threat intelligence. You need to know what's going on and what types of systems are being used to attack you or attack companies like you, right? There are two things that we talked about when we were looking at the CVSS and the EPSS scores. And the CVSS score has to do with severity, and the EPSS score has to do with probability. So if there's something that has a critical severity, but the probability is low right now, it doesn't mean that the probability can't spike into 95% in a span of days. So you need to be integrated with threat intelligence feeds so that you are current on threat intelligence and you're being updated in real time. And that way, you know when something is actually gone from a 5% chance of attacking you to an 85% chance of attacking you, and now you can address it and be much more urgent about it. Threat intelligence is very, very important, and being integrated with threat intelligence can prevent a lot of damage from taking place. Then we have the after action reports with actionable improvements, which is again just going back to that lessons learned kind of an environment where we're looking at everything that was done during our detection period, everything that was done during containment, everything that was done during our recovery time and all of that. And what did we do well? What did we do poorly? What can we do from now on? What are actionable steps that we can do from now on to make sure that we detect things faster, to respond and recover faster, to contain faster? How can we lower our false positive rates because the false positives are distracting us from the true positives and we can't dedicate the time and energy in time to go ahead and fix those things? These are all actionable steps that need to be taken. So any kind of review that's done, there needs to be some kind of actionable step or series of steps that have been brought up at the end of that meeting so that the team who is dealing with these things knows exactly what to do and they don't have to come up with the actions themselves. It's much better for management because management has more experience, right? That's why they're management. So it's much better for management to come up with, okay, this is what you're going to do from now on based on what we've discovered. So these are all key things. These are all best practices that would exist in a very beautiful, humming, well-configured incident response, disaster recovery, digital forensics, business continuity type of an environment. And that brings us to our practice questions for Chapter 10, Episode 10 of Incident Response Lifecycle and Management. And so, as always, we are going to be using questions that are not identical to what's going to be on the actual exam, because we are forbidden from using the actual questions from the exam. We're going to go through multiple choice questions and scenario-based questions. And the whole goal here is to introduce you to the concepts in a different way so that you can get the wheels turning in your head, so that you learn critical thinking or you improve your critical thinking steps. And some of the things that I do, and you'll see me go through them, is that, I want to gain clarity on what the question is asking. I want to remove and eliminate all of the incorrect answers right away. And then I want to look for the most obvious answer. So if you really understand what the question is asking you, then the rest of those things can be relatively simple to figure out. And that's exactly what we're going to be focusing on. So question 1 is, which phase of the IR lifecycle focuses on determining why the incident occurred, right? So we're trying to figure out why the incident occurred. Is it containment, eradication, root cause analysis, or detection? So obviously, all of these things are a part of the lifecycle, but detection is figuring out, noticing that something is going on. Containment is stopping it from spreading. Eradication is getting rid of it, deleting it. And then root cause analysis is trying to figure out why this occurred. So the answer would be C. The next question is, the most important reason to integrate incident response with BCDR is to reduce logging requirements, to ensure business functions can continue during and after an incident, automatically patch systems, replace the need. So the most important reason, right? So that's one of the things that you were looking for here, to integrate IR with BCDR, business continuity, disaster recovery, is to reduce logging requirements. No, that's not the answer. It has nothing to do with that. Automatically patch systems, also no, because that's not what we're going to be doing. We don't know what we're patching. And so automatically patching things is not necessarily the approach for any environment. Replacing the need for forensics, absolutely not. We're not trying to replace anything here. The key thing is to enhance. We're not trying to replace things unless that thing is really outdated and it's actually hurting us. We're not trying to replace anything. And forensics is a very important concept. So forensics happens after incident response and business continuity, disaster recovery. After all of these things are done, we then go into forensics to try to figure out what happened, why it happened, etc. So the key reason, the most important reason, is to ensure business functions can continue during and after an incident. All right. Autopsy is primarily used for forensic disk image and analysis, timeline creation, real-time network packet capture, automated adversary emulation, cloud configuration scanning. So real-time network packet capture is not the case. That's more like Wireshark. Automated adversary emulation is more like Atomic Red Team and Caldera. Cloud configuration scanning could be Trivy or Scout Suite or something like that. So autopsies for forensic disk image analysis and timeline creation. If you pay attention to it, all of these things are saying completely different things, right? Real-time network packet capture is a completely different process than adversary emulation, than cloud configuration scanning. So all of these items are saying different things. So the most relevant answer is the fact that autopsies in forensics. So that would be the answer. In a mature IR program, playbooks should be reviewed only after a major breach, only when the CISO so requested, never after every significant incident, and at least annually. So as I've mentioned in previous practice questions, the key term only and the key term never always stand out as red flags to me. It's like a 99% chance that these are not the answers. So only after a major breach, no. Only when the CISO so requests it, no. Never, I mean, no. Once written, they are permanent? Absolutely not. That is insane. These are live documents. Playbooks are live documents. They're constantly being updated. There is no such thing as a permanent playbook. So after every significant incident and at least annually is probably the most obvious answer, which is the correct answer. The primary purpose of chain of custody in digital forensics is to speed up analysis, prove evidence has not been tampered with, reduce storage requirements, automatically generate reports. So if you remember the chain of custody form and the different scenarios, right? So evidence gets gathered from the crime scene. From the crime scene, we take it to the evidence locker. Somebody else grabs it from the evidence locker. So all of that has to do with the evidence itself and making sure that the evidence has not been tampered with. It is not to speed up analysis. Most likely, it's going to slow down analysis. It's not to reduce storage requirements because it has nothing to do with storage requirements. And it's also not to automatically generate any kind of a report. That is not what chain of custody does. So prove that the evidence has not been tampered with is what we're looking for. Which type of exercise involves live systems and actual attacker simulation? So is it tabletop, functional, full-scale, discussion-based only? So tabletop and discussion-based are pretty much the same thing. So they're rehearsals that we're doing over a table with the team, just kind of rehearsing back and forth, talking back and forth. Functional is a partial exercise, and the full-scale red team exercise is probably the one that involves live systems and actual attacker simulation. So that would be the most relevant answer. There we go. During the 2025 CrowdStrike global outage, which was treated as an incident response event, but it was not a malicious attack, right? It was just an outage. Organizations with strong BCDR integration recovered fastest by waiting for Microsoft patches, switching to alternate identity providers, disabling all EDR tools, re-imaging every endpoint. So, okay, again, looking at the answers and then looking at the question, right? So disabling all EDR tools sounds like an idiotic response. So that's definitely not the case. And by the way, I didn't come up with these responses just so I'm not calling myself an idiot, even though I have tendencies sometimes to be stupid. But I didn't come up with these. These were created by AI. So when we're looking at this, it's like, okay, well, it doesn't make sense to disable all of the EDR tools. So that's definitely a wrong answer. We're also not re-imaging every endpoint. That's a separate, that has nothing to do with this because CrowdStrike having a global outage doesn't require us to re-image every single one of our endpoints. We're also not waiting for Microsoft patches in this particular case because we have no idea how long that's going to take. And we're talking about the companies that recovered fastest. So just waiting around twiddling your thumbs is not going to cause you to recover fastest. So switching to an alternate identity provider and cloud failover would be the best case scenario, which is exactly what they did. The key difference between a response plan and a playbook is playbooks are high level, plans are detailed, plans are for executives only. They are the same thing. Plans are high level strategy. Playbooks are scenario specific procedures. So they're definitely not the same thing. Plans are not for executives only. The executives probably don't even know about these things. Playbooks are not high level. Plans are high level. Incident response plans are high level, and then the playbooks are scenario specific procedures with step-by-step instructions. Which forensic artifact is most useful for identifying lateral movement commands? Okay, great. This is a really good question. So which forensic artifact is most useful for identifying lateral movement commands? So we have browser history, memory dump, firewall logs, disk image of a backup server. I mean, at first glance, I would say memory dump with volatility. Firewall logs, not necessarily, because they just talk about what goes in and out of our network. Browser history, not necessarily, because we're talking about lateral movement commands that would happen on a terminal, so it really doesn't have anything to do with the browser. And the disk image of a backup server is the disk image of a backup server, so that doesn't seem useful to us either. So really, the only thing that really stands out is the memory dump using volatility, because commands will exist in memory, and a lot of times commands get wiped after the computer or the thing itself is reset or turned off or rebooted, whatever. So memory dumps would probably be the most relevant answer. The most important metric for measuring IR program maturity is the number of alerts generated, the total number of incidents, mean time to contain, and the mean time to remediate, number of playbooks written. So the most important metric for measuring IR program maturity would be these, in my opinion. Total number of incidents has nothing to do with that. I guess we can't technically say that. Like, if we have a really good incident response program, that we should have a low number of incidents. That could be something that I can convince myself for, but it's not the most obvious answer. The number of alerts generated doesn't really have anything to do with incident response. It's more of our SOC, Security Operations Center environment. And the number of playbooks written, it's good. I think we should have good playbooks and comprehensive playbooks, but I wouldn't say it's the most important metric, right? So the most important metric would be the mean time to contain and the mean time to remediate something, and so that would be my answer. Post-incident root cause analysis should include technical factors, or keyword right here, right? Only technical factors, technical process and human factors, only human error, nothing focus on blame. Okay, that's obviously the wrong answer. That's so stupid, such a stupid answer. So definitely not D, okay? And it's also not the ones that say only. We're not looking for only technical factors. We're not looking for only human error. We're looking for technical, process, and human factors to try to figure out exactly what caused this thing. In the Change Healthcare ransomware attack in 2024, organizations with mature playbooks recovered faster primarily because they had pre-written regulatory notification procedures and coordinated with CySA quickly, ignored HHS reporting requirements, waited for vendor patches, disabled all backups. So D is not right. They also didn't wait for vendor patches, because if they did, then they wouldn't be recovering faster. So that's not it. And it's disabling all backups is stupid, and it's not it. Ignoring the reporting requirements is also not the answer. So the only answer can be that they had pre-written regulatory notification procedures and they coordinated with CySA. Very good. All right, scenario. So the scenarios don't have answers to them, okay? So I'm going to read the scenario. I want you to pause, drop your comments below of what you would do, and then replay the video and then see what I would have said. And then we'll kind of have this dialogue inside of the comments, and maybe people can communicate with each other inside of the comments. Please keep your responses friendly. Don't be rude to each other. Be respectful to each other. If there are corrections that you would make, just list the corrections that you would make. No name calling, nothing like that. Okay. So you are leading an incident response team after a ransomware incident that encrypted critical production servers. List the 3 main phases of the IR lifecycle that you must complete after containment. Explain how BCDR integration would affect your recovery strategy. So after containment, we would be doing eradication, we would be doing recovery, and then we would be going into the post-incident interactions. So things like reporting and doing the tabletop exercises and things like that, unless I'm forgetting something. But for sure, after containment, we would be doing eradication and recovery for sure. And then after the recovery, we would be going into, oh, you know what, continuous monitoring. That's what comes after recovery. So it would be eradication, recovery, and continuous monitoring. Those would be the three main phases. And how the business continuity and disaster recovery integration would affect our recovery strategy would speed it up. So if we actually had business continuity and disaster recovery integrated with our incident response, then we would be much speedier in our recovery stage, and we would get back to business as usual faster, and our systems would be recovered faster. So those are my answers, and if you have anything else or if you would like to add to it, please drop it in the comment section. Next one, same thing, right? I'm going to read it, pause the video, drop your answer, and then play the video and then see what I said. So, during a forensic investigation of a compromised endpoint, you suspect lateral movement via PowerShell. Name 2 specific forensic artifacts you would examine, recommend 1 tool, and what you would look for. So the specific forensic artifacts that I would examine to confirm this would be to look at our syslogs and to see the commands in the history of the commands that have been run inside of our PowerShell terminal. And the second one that I would examine would be, oh man, I'm drawing a blank. I actually don't know. So tell me what you would drop. What would be your 2 things that you would drop? Recommend 1 tool and what you would look for. Autopsy, that would be the one. We would look for that, and then we would look up terms for PowerShell, and we would look up terms for any kind of lateral movement, so logging in from one computer to another one or for one user to another one. Those would be the type of things that I would look for. And yeah, I would definitely use Autopsy for it. You can also use Forensic Toolkit for it as well. We can also use volatility because PowerShell commands could be inside of volatile memory, so that could be another thing that we could use. So looking at random access memory would also probably fall under the forensic artifacts, as well as looking for the PowerShell execution inside of the PowerShell process. That could be it, right? So those are my answers, but I am definitely open to other responses, and I would encourage you to drop your response. Your organization has just completed a full-scale IR simulation using Caldera. List 3 types of improvements you should document in the after-action report. Explain why regular exercises are critical for IR program maturity. So the 3 types of improvements would be our mean time to detect, our mean time to respond or remediate, mean time to contain. Those would be the things that I would definitely want to improve. If there was anything that was missed in our playbook for the steps that we should have taken, or if there are configurations that we should have made to our tools so that we can detect what's going on and get rid of false positives, all of these things would be things that I would look at for improvements. Why are these things critical for IR program maturity? Because it keeps us on our toes and it keeps us on the offense. It keeps us proactive. Instead of waiting for somebody to attack us, we can just constantly attack ourselves just so we can find our own vulnerabilities and the chinks in our armor, and to find where our weaknesses are in our detection and response capabilities, and make sure that we improve ourselves. These are some of the key reasons why these things are so important, and I would encourage you to definitely check them out too, and kind of go ahead and drop your comment in the comment section and tell me what you think would be 3 types of improvements and why you think these things are important. And with that, we are wrapped with our practice questions for Chapter 10, Episode 10. If you want to get those practice questions, that slideshow with all the questions, hundreds of questions in there, as well as the notebook that I'm using, or I should say the book that I've written that I'm using for the lecture, as well as the incident response playbook template, the forensic quick guide, after action report template, as well as the scripts that we have developed for CYSA. So we created some Python scripts while we were going through earlier chapters, and there are dozens of Python scripts that already exist for system administration and cybersecurity. There are also all of the course contents and practice questions for Security Plus and PenTest Plus and Linux Plus and Network Plus, and so many other things. You get access to me directly in Discord and a bunch of other stuff as well, and all of the future stuff that comes out as well. So all of those things. To get access to all of that stuff, make sure that you check out Hackaholics Anonymous. For the people who are Hackaholics Anonymous agent and above members, then all of these things are already inside of the members area for you. So you can find the links to that inside of our community tab on the channel homepage, and go ahead and download whatever you want and use whatever you want, study, do all the cool things that you can do. And with that, we're pretty much done. So chapter 10 is officially done. Domain 3 is officially done. And in our next domain, we're going to talk about reporting and communication, which is also very, very important. And it's the last domain. And then we have chapters 11 and 12. And then we're going to have our conclusion. And we're officially going to be done with CompTIA CySA. So I appreciate you hanging out with me this entire time. We're at the home stretch and we're going to wrap this whole thing up. And you will be officially done and prepared for CySA+. If you found value in this video, and if you'd like to get more videos like this one, then make sure that you like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so that you get notified the next time that a video comes out. Make sure you drop a comment in the comment section below. If you have answers to the scenario questions, that would be amazing. If you want some things clarified, I'll be here and I'll chime in inside of the comments as well. I always do. There are other playlists that we're working on. So there is the Pentest Plus labs that are still being rolled out. There's the offensive pen testing playlist from Try Hack Me that's being rolled out. AI for cybersecurity. The rest of the stuff for CySA+, and then there's future videos and all these other things that are going to come out. There's a lot of stuff that comes out on this channel. So to get notified of them, make sure that you like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell. I would love to have you in a part of our community. It would be amazing. And if you really want to go the extra mile, and if you want to ensure that your education goes as far as it possibly can, and you become a part of a really, really cool, fun community with a bunch of cool nerds like me, then make sure that you also consider Hackaholics Anonymous. To get access to the CySA Plus book, the practice questions, the exclusive episode downloads, and to get access to the CompTIA Linux Plus, Network Plus, Pentest Plus, and Security Plus course contents, and to get access to me via Discord plus all the future perks and content rollouts, consider joining Hackaholics Anonymous. We have 4 tiers: the Supporter, Agent, Guardian, and Master. Each tier gets their own Discord server and early access to content. The Agent, Guardian, and Master levels get exclusive content, exclusive downloads, monthly Python automations, live streams with me every month, plus so much more. And to join, you can simply click the link in the description below. It's the link that says Join Hackaholics Anonymous. I look forward to seeing you in the Discord chats. If not, I look forward to seeing you in the comment section. Until then, happy hacking and stay out of trouble. It's your boy Hank Hackerson at Hank Hacks Hackers, your favorite network and system attacker / protector. If no one else loves you, Hank loves you. Love, peace, and chicken grease, and I will see you in the next episode later.